Hey guys. This is part 9 of What If Naruto Was Luffy's Sister. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 28, Punk Hazard 3. Naru stared at the broken wood underneath the samurai clenched fists. The ship was made of one of the greatest materials ever existed, but it still managed to break under his touch. His strength was no joke indeed. It wasn't just his physical strength alone, but even his aura was deadly impressive. More specifically, his chakra-like ryo that kept on flowing out of his body. If she didn't know any better, she would have thought that Kinemon was actually a person from her world. You shitty samurai! What are you doing scaring everyone with your scary presence? Sanji yelled from above, standing just outside of the galley as he displayed his dissatisfaction and disapproval at Kinemon on his face. You even broke our ship, you damn bastard! Sorry, Sanji-kun. He's just worried about his son. Isn't that right, Kinemon-san? Naru spoke calmly. Despite being the closest person to be exposed to the samurai's overbearing presence, she remained calm and didn't seem to be bothered by it at all. Kinemon realized that he had just lost control over his emotions, and quickly stopped releasing his deadly aura that he would only use when facing an enemy. Although he was yelled at and cursed by the pervert man with swirly eyebrows, he wasn't angry at all. After all, in this matter, he was the one at fault. After looking at the broken wood for a few moments, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then, he opened his eyes and turned his body around, only to see the rest of the children huddled together while staring at him with a fearful look. There was also Frankie standing in front of them while looking at him, and the broken railing with a frown. My apologies. I didn't mean to do that. Kinemon immediately expressed his regret by bowing his head sincerely to them. He may be a prideful samurai, but he still knew that in this situation, he was the one at fault. TCH. Sanji clicked his tongue in response. Knowing that the damn samurai was just worried over the safety of his still missing son, even Sanji couldn't find it within himself to continue scolding him. Instead, he just said, "Just don't break anything else while you're still here, or else you will pay with a lot of money." I understand. Sanji then turned to look at Naru with concern in his eyes. Naru-san, are you alright? Though he didn't show it, the pressure emitted by Kinemon just now was truly scary. He really thought that a powerful enemy suddenly appeared and was ready to head into battle, only to realize that the terrifying presence actually belonged to the samurai. The fact that Naru-san alone was able to stand close to him without showing much reaction was truly impressive. Even though he knew that she was probably the least affected among everyone on this ship, his habit to be concerned over beautiful women was hard to break. I'm fine, Sanji-kun. Thank you for your concern. Naru smiled at him. Feeling blissful for receiving the beauty's smile, Sanji then told Frankie to fix the broken railing. Once the cyborg nodded and gave him a thumbs up, he then returned back to the galley and continued to make some warm meals. I am sorry for the trouble. Kinemon apologized once again to Frankie when the cyborg started to approach them. Frankie just waved him off and laughed. You don't have to worry about this small problem. With my super amazing skills, I can fix that in no time. True to his words, he did fix the broken railing in just a very short amount of time. After Frankie was done, he then returned back to whatever he was doing previously. The children were also starting to relax once again as they were distracted by the heavenly smell coming from upstairs. Now that there were only Kinemon and Naru left at the same spot, the former found it awkward for him to say anything after his emotional outburst. He was ashamed of what he had done. But more importantly, he felt great sadness and anger and hard upon recalling the matters mentioned by Naru about Wano and that man. Sadness for the fate of his proud land. And anger at the one responsible for the fate of his land. Before he knew it, Kinemon was the one who spoke first once he was calm enough to speak. Naru-dano, you must be wondering why I reacted the way I did after what you just said. If my words offended you, then I. Rest assured, Naru-dano. It is not you that I am angry at. He cut her off before she could finish her sentence. In fact, I I think it is better if I tell you a little bit about myself. Naru might have told the others that he lost control of his emotions because he was worried over his missing son, but the two of them knew it better that his brief breakdown wasn't about Momonosuke at all. Kinemon took a deep breath, and sensing the complicated emotions coming from the man, Naru was about to tell him that it was fine and he didn't have to say anything that would make him uncomfortable, but seeing how resolute he was, she gave up in the end. Actually, I, along with my other companions, have been away from Wano for a very long time. He started with a grim expression. That Kurozumi Orochi whom you said to be the current shogun of Wano, he is not the true ruler of the country at all. That bastard is just a traitor. He betrayed our shogun. He caused him his death and took away the throne from the rightful heir. That traitor was never meant to rule over Wano in the first place. Naru listened carefully as he continued to speak with a furious expression. Oden-sama. Oden-sama was killed by that bastard and that dirty pirate, Kaido. Hearing what you just said about the condition of Wano from a few years ago, it means that Wano has completely fallen because of them. They have ruined our land and caused so much suffering to our people. I can't even bring myself to imagine how bad the country is today compared to what you have seen a few years ago. Just imagining it. Kinemon grabbed his chest and gritted his teeth. I feel my heart ache for our people. He then closed his eyes, trying to calm himself by taking a few deep breaths. Frowning, she then opened his mouth. The Kaido that you spoke of, is he a man of huge muscular body with dark hair and has horns on his head? Hearing the general description of Kaido from the young lady beside him, Kinemon opened his eyes instantly and looked at her in surprise. You know him? I don't think there is anyone in the Grand Line who doesn't know the name of the Yonkos. Yonkos? Kinemon was confused. Who are they? What relation is there between that bastard and them? Seeing the genuine curiosity in his eyes, Naru was speechless and wondered where had he been this entire time that he didn't even know about the Yonkos. Didn't he claim that he had been away from Wano for a long time? Then how come he didn't even know anything about the Yonkos since he ought to explore the outside world? Regardless, she still explained about the Yonkos to him. The Yonkos are 4 strong and powerful pirate captains with their own territories. There are many pirate crews allying themselves with the Yonkos, causing their strength to grow even more. Currently, Kaido is a Yonko that is feared by many, and he is also the one that is considered to be the one with the highest authority in Wano. It can be said that Wano is the base of his crew, and he is also the ruler of Wano today, being above the shogun himself. The more he listened to her words, the angrier he felt that veins were bulging across his neck and hands. But at least he didn't lose his temper this time. Kaido is the reason for every misfortune that has happened. If it wasn't for his involvement, then Oden-sama, Toki-sama, everyone couldn't bring himself to say more. Kinemon swallowed everything that was about to come out of his mouth. Once we return back to Wano, that day will be the day that his head will be rolling on the ground. He swore with determination. Staring at the samurai with a deep, profound gaze, Naru asked a question that she was most curious about. When exactly did you leave Wano, Kinemon-san? He flinched at her question, which didn't go unnoticed by her. It was soon after the death of Oden-sama. The death of the previous shogun happened 20 years ago. Having been there once for several days, it was natural for her to gain an insight about the country that she was visiting. She continued to give him a deep look, but in the end, she gave him a comforting smile and said, "It must be hard on you, for not being able to return to your country for such a long time." That is true. The two didn't say anything afterwards, each with their own thoughts. Later, after exchanging a few more basic pleasantries, Naru made an excuse and went to her room. Inside the girls' quarter room, Nami was nowhere to be found. The younger girl was still enjoying her hot shower, thus giving Naru some alone time as she sorted out her thoughts about what just happened. Her conversation with Kinemon had got her thinking about something. Regarding the matters of Wano, she knew that the condition there was awful, especially when it was under the ruling of Kaido and the current shogun. However, as an outsider, she didn't feel the need to get involved with the country as there was absolutely no reason for a conflict to occur between her and Kaido. Not to mention that the country had long been in his possession even before she went to the Grand Line 12 years ago. She pitied the poor people, of course, but that was something that she couldn't help even with her abilities 7 years ago. Back then, she was already struggling to help the slaves that she had rescued, so there was no way for her to handle Kaido at that moment. Even if she did have the abilities back then, she would still to not choose get involved. Plus, whatever internal conflicts there were in Wano, it had nothing to do with her. She was just an outsider with small knowledge of their cultures who had been there for several days, which was enough for her to understand the poor state of the land, before leaving the country with a fragile sickly baby with her. As for what Kinemon had said, she could guess that the power struggle there was so bad that the previous shogun was killed and the traitor managed to usurp the throne thanks to the involvement of Kaido, who was already known to be quite a terrifying pirate even before he became a Yonko. For Kinemon and his companions to escape soon after the death of their shogun, it would be a lie to say that she wasn't curious to know the reason for their action. Based on the emotions that she felt from him as he mentioned about the previous shogun, Kinemon appeared to be full of respect towards the one named Odin. The samurai didn't appear to be a coward that would run away after the death of his ruler, so there must be a reason why he had to escape and stayed hidden from the rest of the world for 2 decades. Not only that, but he also failed to recognize either her or the Straw Hats. It wasn't like she wanted to brag that she was famous or anything, but it was impossible for someone of his caliber who lived in the New World to not know of her. He also didn't recognize the devil fruit that he had eaten. Weren't 20 years away from his isolated country enough for him to gain the information needed about the outside world? And the fact that he didn't even know anything about the Yonkos meant that he didn't come out of his hiding for so long until recently. He might be hiding from Kaido and the shogun. But why? And why did he choose to appear now after 20 years of hiding? Naru was full of questions, and she couldn't help but to feel suspicious. However, it was impossible for a person to hide his evil nature and negative feelings from her. His negative emotions were there, just like everyone else, but Kinemon bore no evilness within him. Just this alone was enough to prove that the samurai was definitely a good person. Therefore, her suspicions of him were not that strong. But still, there was something in her guts that was telling her that there were some unsaid truths that Kinemon was trying to hide. Anyway, that was his business. As long as he didn't implicate her or her precious people, then she would not do anything to him. At least right now, he still hadn't done anything that could cause a conflict to happen between them. A while later, everyone was enjoying the warm meals prepared by Sanji. Though the only thing that he made was a large pot of hot soup, it was still the most delicious soup that everyone had tasted. Everyone, especially the children, liked the soup very much, which caused Sanji to be happy since everybody enjoyed the food that he made. Like earlier, the smaller children were inside under the care of Nami and Chopper, while the rest stayed at the open deck with the giant children. Thankfully, the deck was big enough to accommodate everyone. The adults were standing together as they watched over the children. I have already informed Luffy-san of our current situation a while ago, so they should be here any time soon, Brook said before having a sip of the hot tea that he liked. Usopp-san also mentioned that they have found a pair of legs at the burning island, which I believe belongs to you, Kinemon-san. Really? That's great. I can finally be complete again, Kinemon exclaimed happily. Then once Luffy and the rest are here, we shall head back into the facility, decided Nara as she looked at the samurai. Kinemon nodded before turning around to stare at the building that had Momonosuke inside, wishing that he could just barge inside at this moment. However, he knew that it would be a bad idea. For now, he had to be patient. Wait for me, Momonosuke. Meanwhile, inside one of the many rooms in the facility, a gaseous-like entity in purple was busy scolding a group of people in yellow suits. All of them? With that many people on your side, and none of you managed to capture even one of them? What about the children then? All of them have escaped together with the intruders, master, answered one of them while cowering in fear. The answer certainly was not what Caesar Clown, who was the master of Punk Hazard, wanted to hear. Displeasure written all over his extremely pale face as he glared at them murderously. When these useless people suddenly barged into his office, thus disrupting his rest, he was annoyed. Then when he heard the unpleasant reports of how some intruders that he himself had ordered to kidnap somehow managed to defeat his underlings, and even dared to take the children to escape from the facility, he was more than just annoyed. He was enraged. How could he not? Those brats were a part of his experiment, and without them for him to see the great result of his experimentation, how was he supposed to keep up with his works? He needed those brats back. Caesar Clown changed back into his human form, which was a tall man with long unruly hair, extremely pale skin, and a pair of glowing yellow eyes. What would grab anyone's attention upon seeing him would definitely be the pair of horns at the back of his head, and the dark style makeup that he had on his face. They managed to escape? Then why am I not informed of this sooner? Are all of you this useless? He continued to scold them. We have already tried to send someone to inform you of this matter, master, but those people were just too strong. Too strong? Caesar sneered with an unconcealed contempt in his eyes. Whether they are truly as strong as what you said, I don't believe that they can handle as many as our people with their small number alone. All of you, quickly go and gather more people to chase after those intruders. Kill if you must, but I want those children alive. Yes, master. With his order, the people in yellow suits saluted him before they left the room as quickly as the wind. As they were leaving, another man came in with a frown on his gloomy face. He was a tall man with a lean figure. Black hair could be seen underneath his mushroom-like hat, and he was also wearing a long black coat with a Jolly Roger printed on the lower half of the fabric. Holding a sword in one hand, he took a brief glance at the retreating people before he went to sit on the sofa in the middle of the room. This man was known as Trafalgar Law. Law. The sneer that Caesar had was immediately replaced by a pleasant smile when the man appeared. Frowning, Law opened his mouth. I heard about the ruckus here. Explain to me, what's with these children that I am not aware of? Caesar's smile stiffened, then he fixed his expression before saying, That is something that you shouldn't concern yourself with, since I have everything under control. In fact, why don't you go ahead and help me to investigate the identity of those intruders? The captain of the Heart Pirates stayed quiet, but the slight displeasure in his eyes could still be seen if one looked closely enough. But alas, the shadow casted by his hat did a good job in covering how he felt at the moment. Law and Caesar were not exactly best buddies. He was here with his own purpose, and he hadn't even been here for that long. Hence, there were many things around here that he perhaps wasn't aware of. Like the existence of some children that he had just heard of. Though he had no clue as for what reason there were children in this kind of place, but considering Caesar's own characteristics, he had a hunch that their existence here was definitely not for a good cause. Perhaps it was good that the children had been taken away by the intruders. Of course, he only kept his own thoughts to himself. It would be stupid to offend the scientist when he hadn't even managed to get what he came here for. Sound of footsteps suddenly grabbed the two men's attention. Looking at the door, they saw a beautiful woman strode into the room with a playful smile. Although she was a beauty with a pretty face, white skin, piercing golden eyes, and a beautiful shade of green for the color of her hair, the most eye-catching part of her body would definitely be the pair of wings that she had as her arms. Not only that, but she also had a pair of sharp talons that replaced her feet. There was also a feathery tail at her back. She was what people would describe a harpy. I don't think there is a need for us to investigate the intruder's identity anymore. Monet, where have you been this entire time? Are you even aware of what is going on right now? And what do you mean we don't have to investigate those intruders anymore? Yufufufu, of course I am aware of what is happening around the island. She responded with a light tone while waving her left wing that seemed to be holding something. Only then did the two men notice the newspaper that she was carrying. If you knew the identity of the intruders, you will be more careful with your actions and planning from now on. Caesar was displeased with her words. What do you mean? Have you found anything useful about them? While the two spoke, Law remained silent as he stared at the winged woman in curiosity. Here, have a look at this. Monet handed the newspaper to Caesar. I have just returned from the burning island by the way, and guess who I saw there? With the newspaper in his hands, Caesar flipped it open to a certain page that had been marked by Monet. Law was sitting, so he couldn't see the content. However, he paid close attention to Caesar and saw the alarmed and astonished look on the mad scientist's extremely pale face. He wasn't sure about it, but it seemed like his face had just become paler than usual. Law was right, Caesar's face became more white by what he just saw. On a certain page, there was the recent news of the unexpected comeback of a certain pirate crew not too long ago. Eyes drawn to the picture that belonged to the captain of the crew, he mumbled, "The Straw Hat Crew." Monet nodded. "It is indeed them. 4 of them are within the area of the burning island, including the captain himself." Now, even Law displayed a slight surprise at the unexpected news. When there was a report saying that there was a pirate ship seen outside of the vicinity of the burning island, Monet had flown herself over there to take a look. When she saw the intruders, she shared similar expressions as Caesar. She really didn't expect to see the infamous Monkey D. Luffy among the intruders. "I thought I should tell you this, but they also managed to defeat Vegapunk's dragon." "That dragon?" "Yufufufu. Considering the fact that their friends are here, I'm sure that Monkey D. Luffy and his group will also be here soon. Also, I received a report from one of the centaurs stationed at the burning island that they are about to cross the lake. They are probably crossing the lake as we speak at the moment." The more she talked, the more he panicked. What about those centaurs then? Already waiting for them on the other side of the lake. Though, I doubt they can do much about the intruders. Soon after Monet finished her words, someone entered the room and delivered a troublesome matter that caused Caesar to almost grab his hair out of frustration. "What do you mean there's a sighting of a marine ship heading towards here? First the Straw Hats, then the Marines. Who else was going to show up next? The Yuzukage?" As Caesar was stressing out, he finally realized that Law was also there. A thought suddenly came into his mind. "Ah, Law. Since you have nothing to do, I want you to deal with those Marines." Law frowned when the attention was now on him. "You want me to kill them?" "What? Of course not. I just want you to drive those flies away from this island. Since both of you and them are on the same side, then you should be able to deal with them accordingly, right?" Saying that, Law, who was the captain of the Heart Pirates, was on the same side as the Marines wasn't wrong. After all, Law himself was now a Shichibukai, which meant that he was now affiliated with the world government. Law was in a deep thought before he voiced out his curiosity. "How are you going to deal with the Straw Hats?" At his question, Caesar clicked his tongue in annoyance. If the intruders were other people, he had no problem with the thought of annihilating them right away. But alas, this time, the intruders were none other than the Straw Hat Crew, whose captain was related to one person that someone like him couldn't offend. Caesar then shared a glance with the smiling Monet. It wasn't clear what the two were trying to convey, but it seemed like the two of them had come into the same understanding. With an amiable smile, Caesar said to Law, "Naturally, I have my own way of dealing with them. You don't have to concern yourself with this matter." Law gave them a deep look. Moments passed. In the end, he stood up from his seat without any words and started to walk away. "Then I'll go ahead and deal with the unwanted visitors." Caesar and Monet watched as Law's retreating figure completely disappeared from their view. Not long after the Shichibukai was gone, Caesar spoke. "What do you think about Monkey D. Luffy, Monet?" Not wanting to sit anymore, Monet went to the counter and sat on one of the high stools. Supporting her chin with her wing, she said lazily, "You know this as well as I do about him. Besides his many interesting tales of going against the world government in Eni's lobby, the Impel Down, and his participation in the Paramount War 2 years ago, he is also known for his impressive family background." Letting out a chuckle, she glanced at the stack of papers in Caesar's hands with a coy look. "Son of Dragon, sworn brother of Gold Ace, and most importantly, he is the precious younger brother of the Yuzukage. His identity alone is enough to be considered a threat to the world government." Caesar's gaze deepened as he mulled over Monet's words. Of course he knew about the details. He didn't care about a mere rookie pirate like Monkey D. Luffy, but what made him cautious was the one backing him up. After all, Monkey D. Naru was a big shot that not even the world government nor the Yonkos dared to offend, let alone that person. Her existence was unexpected, and when she appeared, she automatically disrupted the balance of power in this world. With nobody dare to offend her, wasn't it right to say that she was the one who stood at the pinnacle of power right now? And as a small figure in hiding who only relied on the power and influence of another person for his current freedom to escape an early demise, Caesar definitely hesitated to do something to Monkey D. Luffy. If the intruders had no relation whatsoever with the devil-like Yuzakage, he would have no problem with the thought of ending them right away this instant. However, he just sent people to go after them. He even gave out a killing order. Realizing what he had done, he cursed. Seeing that the man was troubled, Monet spoke. About this matter, why don't we inform him? Him? An image of a certain man appeared in his head, and Caesar was enlightened. You're right. I'm sure he will know what to do with those bastards. Shurororo. Monet. Give a call to Joker. Monet covered her smirk with her wing. Right away. Unbeknownst to the two of them, there was another person standing outside of the room, listening quietly to their conversation. Law had his back leaned against the wall, and he had a dark look on his face. The shadow that fell on his whole person caused his expression to look even scarier, as he gripped his sword with a very strong grip, as if he wanted to break it in half with his strength alone. Taking a deep breath, he held himself back from doing something that could very well ruin his plan. Reluctantly, he walked away without making any sound. Caesar's annoying laugh was the last thing he heard before his figure disappeared through the corner. With a change of expression, it was unknown what he truly thought of as he made his way towards the main entrance of the building. And just in time, he heard the ringing of a bell. This time, he knew that the people waiting outside were the ones that he had to deal with accordingly, as what Caesar wanted him to do. Opening the door, he was greeted with the surprised face of Smoker. Behind him stood a woman and a bunch of rough-looking Marines. With a devilish smirk, he spoke. What business do you have here at my vacation house? At the same time. Hey, can you walk faster? I don't want to miss out on Sanji's tasty food. Luffy whining. A tick appeared on Brownbeard's head. He was a big man whose lower body was that of a crocodile, complete with 4 legs and a strong tail that was swaying left and right behind him as he moved. Though he looked big and strong enough to scare most people, compared to the small person riding on his back and still had the cheek to whine about the speed of his mobility, his courage was not big enough to be as arrogant as he was before he suffered a crushing defeat under this tiny pirate. Besides him, there were also another 3. Why don't you walk with your own 2 legs then? Brownbeard quietly grumbled under his breath, but Luffy still managed to hear him anyway. 2 legs? Luffy blinked his eyes twice, before glancing at his back to stare at the extra pair of legs that were stuck on his back. Can't you see? Now I have 4 legs. Luffy, those are somebody else's legs. Usopp, who sat behind him, sighed. You still have to return them back to the owner once we arrive at Sunny. Being reminded that he would not be a centaur for much longer, he instantly became gloomy. My legs. Robin chuckled and said Brook mentioned that the owner of these legs is supposed to be the samurai that we are looking for. What a coincidence, HM. Samurai, huh? Zoro, who was at the very back, grinned. I wonder how strong he is? Strong or not, he must be one scary samurai. Don't forget that he was busy killing people before we got here. Usopp cried out as he imagined the scary scenario in his head, and shuddered in fear. Scary! Brook said that the samurai is here to rescue his son, so it's safe to assume that the people he killed were the ones at fault. Also, don't forget that this is the enemy's territory. Based on what Brook has said about the children that they have rescued from the facility, Caesar Clown is definitely responsible for their odd existence in this dangerous place, considering that he is the boss here. I also believe that Naru will not bring someone who could pose a threat to her side. Shishishishi. If Nachan says that the samurai is nice, then he must be a nice guy. Well, that's true. Usopp acknowledged their words and his fear of the unknown samurai also lessened. Wouldn't that mean that the bad guy is kidnapping children to this place? What else then? This time, Zoro responded to Usopp. Just look around. Does this place or that burning island seems like a good place for a kid to be here? Plus, didn't Nero already say that this Kizer dude is a wanted criminal? Usopp nodded. See? Then Zoro yawned as he was done sharing his 2 cents. No! You guys are wrong. Master has nothing to do with whatever kidnapping that you guys are talking about. Brownbeard, who had been silent when the 4 were talking, suddenly stopped moving as he interrupted their conversation. Disbelief and anger were clearly displayed on his face as he glared at them. He continued, Master is the nicest person ever, and he will never do something like kidnapping children. And I haven't seen any brat around here either, so stop accusing Master like that. The 4 blinked, and only then did the centaur realize that he had just shouted at them who managed to wipe out his entire team without much effort not too long ago, which was why he was giving them a ride out of his own will. However, although he was afraid of being beaten up by them, he still held on to the belief that his kind-hearted master was slandered unjustly by these people. I forgot that he's also one of Caesar's underlings, whispered Usopp to Zoro, who didn't seem bothered. Being a loyal subordinate, it was only natural for Brownbeard to defend his boss. But between the words spoken by a defeated underling of the bad guy and the words spoken by their friends, of course Luffy and the others would believe in the latter. You must like him a lot, remarked Luffy. Of course. Master was the one who gave me and the rest a hope to live on when we have almost given up on life. If it wasn't for him, my crew and I would have died a long time ago. Seeing the sincerity as he praised the supposed kindness of his master, Luffy only smiled before his stomach growled. All right, let's go. We have to hurry if we want to eat Sanji's delicious food. Just like that, Luffy's hunger and loud voice managed to disperse the awkward air around them, and they continued on their journey to the direction of the Thousand Sunny. Since Brownbeard was a resident of this place, he was familiar with the layout of the island. Eventually, it didn't take long for him to bring the 4 Straw Hat Pirates to the main facility. When the group saw a big building at a distance, the most excited one was none other than Luffy, who only had Sanji's tasty food in his head. Is that really the place? Usopp asked with doubt. What if this is a trap, and there is an ambush waiting for us ahead? Let them come. I'll handle them all, Zoro merely said. Obviously, he didn't share the same concern as the paranoid sniper. On the other hand, Brownbeard was somewhat offended by the lack of trust. Though he was the enemy that they had taken as a hostage, and was even forced to become their living transportation, he was still being honest. That is truly Master's place, he stated grumpily. The place that you want to go is not far, but we still have to go around the building for you to reach the place you want to be. Why? Robin asked. There are 2 available harbors where ships can be docked. One of them is the side harbor located right in front of the facility. You can reach that place through a hidden river that is connected to the lake. The other one is the main harbor, but it's located on the other side of the building. The side harbor is the closest, so we have to go through that place first. For a moment, he seemed hesitant to say more, but in the end he still said, I heard a while ago that there might be people guarding that place since they are looking for the other intruders. Going around the building might take some time, but you will avoid some troubles. He was the hostage, but he was still kind enough to give them a warning. How nice. But since when were the Straw Hat Pirates the type to avoid trouble? Even if they did have the intention to avoid troubles, having Luffy, who was the trouble magnet, as the captain, their adventure would never be smooth and peaceful. Not to mention that most of them were not exactly the type to fear attracting troubles. Therefore, ignoring Usopp's warning of being ambushed, Luffy decided to just use the shortest route. Since the captain had already said so, Brownbeard brought them directly to the direction of the side harbor instead of taking the long way. But who would have expected that the moment they arrived, they would stumble upon the unexpected sight of a destroyed ship floating in the air. That's a marine ship, Usopp exclaimed as he pointed his finger to the sky. Even the Marines are here. Retreat! Retreat! They are here to capture us. I know this centaur is luring us to a trap. Usopp continued to panic. I didn't know the Marines were here either. Brownbeard quickly defended himself. Like the long-nosed man, He also panicked when he saw the furious-looking Marines, but when he caught a glimpse of a lone figure amidst the chaos, he was relieved and immediately cried out to get his attention. "Hey, Trafalgar! Help me!" Brownbeard's action made the Straw Hats turn their head towards Law's direction. Luffy recognized him as one of the guys that fought together with him once in Sabaody. Law left a strong impression on Luffy since the older man had also swore that he would find the One Piece and become the next pirate king. "It's you!" Luffy waved at him. "I don't remember your name, but I know you." His words caused Usopp and Zoro to sweat drop while Robin chuckled. Then Usopp noticed a familiar man among the crowd. "Isn't that Smoker?" he pointed out. "Seems to be him," Zoro confirmed as he also recognized the annoying dark blue-haired woman standing next to the white-haired man. "If that annoying woman is here, then that guy is no doubt him." "Oh, Smoker is also here?" Luffy searched for them and proceeded to give both Marines a friendly smile while waving his hand enthusiastically at them. "Why?" Though the calm Law showed no sign of being surprised to see the Straw Hats, the same couldn't be said about the Marines. Smoker glared accusingly at the Shichibukai. "You dared lie to me, Trafalgar Law? The Straw Hats are truly here as I have expected." With a look of indifference, Law responded, "I only said that there are no Straw Hats inside the building. I never mentioned that they are not here on this island." Smoker gritted his teeth. "I don't think we should stay here any longer." Seeing that the situation here was not good, Usopp started to urge the others to leave. "Luffy! Let's just go. We should hurry up and meet up with Sanji and the rest." Luffy briefly glanced between Law and Smoker before he nodded. "Nechan and the others are still waiting for us. With Centaur. Let's go." Since that hateful man pretended like he didn't exist, Brownbeard also didn't want to stay here any longer. With the Marines being here, he decided to retreat and use another route. As they were leaving, they didn't realize that Law was looking at their back with a calculating glint in his eyes. Smoker gritted his teeth so hard that they were about to break. "Like hell I'm letting you escape." He attempted to chase after the escaping pirates, but was interrupted by Law. "Don't forget that I'm still here," exclaimed the smirking Law, and Smoker could do nothing but to continue their battle. In the end, they still ended up going around the building to avoid the Marines, before they eventually arrived at where the Thousand Sunny was located. The first thing that caught their attention the moment they arrived was the sight of the many unconscious bodies spreading across the ground near the ship. When they got on board the ship, they noticed Brook and an unfamiliar man standing next to him. Seeing that the man lacked a pair of legs, they immediately figured out that he must be the samurai mentioned earlier. Having the legs returned to their original owners, Luffy was naturally gloomy and disappointed that he wasn't a centaur anymore, unlike Kinemon, who was overjoyed for being whole again. Once everyone was reunited, the Straw Hats plus Naru and Kinemon went to the galley to discuss their next action. Prior to that, Brownbeard, who had been forced by Luffy to become their transportation, was forced by Sanji to stay on the ship under the reason that he was their enemy. At first, the centaur still harbored the desire to escape, but after seeing the smiling Naru, who he instantly recognized to be the terrifying Uzukage, his face turned pale and he suddenly became an obedient hostage as he sat quietly with the children on the deck. Upstairs, Kinemon was just done introducing himself as a samurai from Wano and explaining his circumstances to everyone, thus giving them a clear understanding of their current situation. After that, Naru revealed her intention on going back to the facility with Kinemon to search for his missing son and Caesar. Naturally, Luffy wanted to follow as well. "You can't just go and have fun without me, Nei-chan." Grabbing her sleeve, he gave her the look that said, "I will follow you no matter what." "Sure," Naru agreed. "Yes." Luffy cheered as he pumped his fist into the air while the others just stared at him with helplessness. "But why exactly do you want to find Caesar, Naru-san? Can't we just continue on our journey to Dressrosa after getting Kinemon's son?" Usopp suddenly asked, which brought everyone's attention to himself before they all turned to stare at Naru, waiting for her answer. They recalled her words that Caesar was acquainted with Doflamingo, who was also affiliated with Kaido. So why in the world did she want to find the mad scientist? On the other hand, Kinneyman was startled when Usopp mentioned the name of the place that they were planning to go. He slammed his hands on the surface of the table, surprising everyone with his unexpected action. Will you be going to that place after this, Naruto? Nara blinked once, then nodded. Another brother of mine and a friend are there for a tournament. Originally, we were supposed to be heading there, but then we received a distress call from this island. Then, Naruto, may I request that my son and I join your next journey? It's just that one of my companions was left there when I departed to save my son. I planned to return back to get him once I saved Momonosuke as soon as possible, but I ended up being captured instead. Though she understood his intention, she didn't say anything and merely glanced at her brother. Following her gaze, Kinneyman understood that the decision for this matter was not for her to decide, but instead, the captain of this ship. Ever since he had been reduced to nothing but a head, he had begged another person to help him out of his cell, and requested another desperate help to find someone that he failed to protect with his own abilities. Even though these people were pirates, they were also good people. So what if he had to beg them once again for their aid? In his current situation, he had nobody else to count on besides himself. He knew that he alone was not able to do everything. It was indeed a blessing that Nara had made her appearance when he was in a hopeless situation. Please! To show his sincerity, the samurai bowed his head slightly towards Luffy. Luffy was not the type to think too deeply. Okay. Kinneyman was delighted. Thank you? Since the captain had spoken, the others naturally had no objection. There was no problem for them to accept another passenger. However, they also had those children to be worried about. Surely they wouldn't follow them all the way to Dressrosa, right? Nami voiced out her concern. You said the Marines are here, and the one in charge is Smoker? Naru asked Luffy and received a nod in response. She recalled the information that she had about that man, and said recently, Smoker has been promoted to a vice admiral, and I remember Grandpa once mentioned that Smoker is a good and responsible Marine. Later, I will go and negotiate with him to help return the children back to their respective family. That's good. Nami heaved out a sigh of relief. Smoker might be an annoying Marine who always tried to shove them into jail, but even the Straw Hats couldn't deny that he was a good person that could be trusted. And as for your question about Caesar, Nara focused on Usopp. Well, originally I didn't plan to get him, but based on our current situation, it seems that it's better for me to get him anyway. Just like that, she told them about how Ace and Yuzu were approached by the former princess of Dressrosa, and the possible rebellion that had a very high probability of happening soon after they arrived there. A rebellion? Nami cupped her face. Didn't we just deal with a rebellion in Fishman Island not too long ago? Oh no. Is this going to be another Alabasta episode? I heard that Doflamingo is even worse than Crocodile. Usopp cried out with a pale complexion on his tanned skin. Really? Chopper stared at the sniper with fear. Alabasta? I wonder how Vivi is doing? Luffy blinked, staying ignorant to the main topic. A princess in trouble. Yash, I will definitely be her knight in shining armor. Sanji started to daydream about carrying a faceless woman in bridal style. Yo-ho-ho-ho. A princess. I wonder if she would show me her panties if I were to aid her in her battle? Brook asked out loud, only to be hit on the head by Nami, who heard him. Joining a rebellion means I will get to fight strong opponents, right? Zoro seemed interested. A super manly fight then, Zoro bro. Frankie encouraged the swordsman. Then, what will you do? Robin stared at Naru. For now, I'm not planning to join that princess since I'm not interested in being involved with a conflict that has nothing to do with me. The others nodded with understanding. Unlike her alliance with the Fishman Island, this time, she truly had no reason to accept Viola's request. However, Yuzu mentioned something that caught my interest, so I decided to meet the princess before I decided to do anything. A rebellion is not a simple thing, and now that we are going there, also not to mention that we are also here, I reckon that it is unavoidable for us to be involved in one way or another, she said with a serious expression. To be frank, although I have no intention to get involved, that doesn't mean that I won't take advantage of the situation. If we can reduce the damage, then why not? After all, the ones who will suffer during the rebellion are the innocent people. Other than her tyrannical reputation, she was also known for her benevolence of saving many lives. More specifically, her actions of stealing away the slaves from the world nobles and turn them into her own citizens. Despite the anger of the entire world government towards her, she wasn't the least bit scared and intimidated by them. Instead, she continued to live her life according to her ways. Of course, she could only accomplish those feats thanks to her own abilities. In this world, who else had the guts to offend her when even Big Mom and the world government had suffered a defeat from her? Kinemon was clueless and failed to understand their conversation 100%, but he understood that Naru was a good person who was willing to help the innocent people that might suffer in the upcoming trouble. At the thought of rebellion, the samurai felt overwhelming discomfort in his heart. He had experienced the same thing in his own country, so how could he not understand the severeness of the situation? The results of the damn rebellion was the death of his shogun, and the sufferings of the innocents under the ruling of the sinners. Therefore, before we leave this place, I would get Caesar to come with us. But what does Caesar have anything to do with the rebellion? Nami asked. Naru responded with a mysterious smile, and Robin was the one who figured out her intention. You are planning to use Caesar against Doflamingo, aren't you? Robin smiled knowingly. Exactly. Location: Dressrosa. Inside of one dark secluded room in the royal palace of Dressrosa, Don Quixote Doflamingo was sitting arrogantly on his majestic chair that was facing the large window, which gave him the best view of his country. Sitting like a king he had one leg above the other, and one hand holding a glass of red wine, while his other hand was resting comfortably on the armrest. Tapping his finger on the armrest with a steady rhythm, he listened to the report from Caesar Clown through a small den mushy on the table next to him. Caesar was reporting about the unexpected appearance of the Straw Hat Pirates in Punk Hazard. Once he finished with his report, Doflamingo also stopped the tapping of his finger. The Straw Hats? He frowned. This joker, what do you want me to do with them? I wouldn't disturb you with this matter if they are simply just random people. Caesar then sighed. But you also know who is the person backing up Monkey D. Luffy. Doflamingo aka Joker, the infamous broker in the underworld, didn't give any response as he was in deep thought. Thinking of the tournament that he had publicized to the entire world, it was definitely not a coincidence that the Straw Hat Pirates were in Punk Hazard, which was the closest to this country. He wondered if they were actually on their way here. Ever since he spread the words that the Gura no Mi shall be given to the ultimate winner of the tournament, he had already expected some familiar people to be here. Among those people would definitely Gol the Ace, who used to be the commander of the 2nd Division in Whitebeard Pirates, but was now resuming his position as the captain of his original pirate crew. Doflamingo still remembered the look of rage and regret displayed on the younger man's face when Edward Newgate breathed his last. Slowly, he grinned at the memory. Since he was the one that was most emotional when Whitebeard died, Doflamingo was sure that Ace would come for the Gura no Mi once he knew that the devil fruit was in his possession. Not only, but he was also being generous by giving him and everyone else a fair chance to obtain the devil fruit, so why wouldn't he come and join the tournament? The Colosseum was a great source of entertainment for the people of Dressrosa. Using the Gura no Mi as a temptation to lure many strong people to join the tournament, Doflamingo had no ulterior motive other than for his own personal entertainment. After all, even though the Colosseum was traditionally used for gladiators to battle each other to death, towards this kind of thing, this king had long gotten bored of it. He needed fresh blood to entertain him. Hence why he used the devil fruit that he found by pure coincidence, to entice new fighters that could entertain him. This upcoming tournament, he was truly looking forward to it. Especially when there was a huge chance that someone like Ace, the son of Roger, would be one of the entertainers. Even if there was a small chance that he wouldn't come, other people that related to him might come instead. Like Monkey D. Luffy, who had just made a comeback with his crew after 2 years of absence. Considering the brotherly relationship between Gol the Ace and Monkey D. Luffy, Doflamingo was even more convinced that the Straw Hats were definitely on their way here, which also meant there was a high chance that the big brother was coming. He might be with the Straw Hats, or he might have already been here. Regardless of the reason why the Straw Hats were in Punk Hazard, their next destination should be here. The only question that he had was, would she also be here? Out of the many people that he had expected to come, she was the one that he wanted to see the most. It would be even better if she decided to join the tournament and battle her own brother. Recalling the godlike image of Monkey D. Neru and her nine-tailed fox as they were glowing and shining in pure golden light that could even rival the brightness of the sun, appearing like a heavenly being descended from heaven, Doflamingo suddenly felt the surge of excitement throughout his whole body. His grin became wider, causing the Shichibukai to appear more devilish than he already was. His desire to have a glimpse of her was so strong that he would even hand over the Guragura no Mi to her if she demanded him to do so. Of course, it would be even better if she decided to join the tournament and battle her own brother for the devil fruit, but that didn't matter. As long as she was involved, he would be interested. His interest over her wasn't like a man interested in a woman, but it was more like he viewed the mysterious Yuzakage as something interesting that he would like to figure out. Whether it was about her true capabilities, her true personality, or her pasts, he wanted to know everything about it. Joker? Caesar's voice brought him back to reality. HM? He forgot what they were talking about for a moment, but when he recalled, he suddenly released a low chuckle and replied, "You said that there are Marines over there as well?" "Yes. It's Smoker who is in charge. I heard that he's here to catch the Straw Hats." Doflamingo contemplated for a few moments, as he considered the many scenarios that might happen in his head. Considering the person backing up Straw Hat Luffy, he really shouldn't even consider the idea of harming that guy. But if he chose to let the Straw Hats do as they pleased at that place without him doing anything, an unwanted accident might happen that would put him in an unfavorable situation later. After all, besides Monkey D. Neru, there was also Kaido that he needed to be aware of. Both of them could end his life without much effort. As he was thinking, the light coming through the window suddenly shifted due to the movements of the clouds in the sky. Rays of light shone upon him and the whole room. Unknowingly, his eyes that were hidden by his sunglasses followed the movement of that one particular cloud. Each cloud had their undistinguished shape and form, just like that one cloud that was slowly changing its shape because of the wind and eventually became something familiar in the eyes of the king. It wasn't a perfect shape, heck, it might even look different in the eyes of others from what his eyes chose to decipher, but it was still clear to him that it was a head with two long pointed ears and a narrow snout. It could be a cat, a dog, a wolf, or a fox. Once again, Doflamingo felt the familiar surge of excitement within his body as his trademark shit-eating grin continued to become wider as he decided on what he should do. Chapter 29, Punk Hazard 4. After their discussion, it was then decided that Neru along with Luffy and Kinemon would be heading back into the facility to look for Momonosuke and Caesar. The others, on the other hand, were responsible for taking care of the ship as well as the children. Right now, everyone was gathered at the open deck, with the exception of a certain reindeer. A while ago, some of the children were showing alarming signs of being in pain. Since then, Chopper had been staying inside his infirmary to do some checkup for the kids and to find out what was wrong with their bodies. "Then, what shall we do with this guy?" Usopp pointed a thumb towards the chained Brownbeard. "See, can't you just let me go now?" Brownbeard gathered his courage and avoided the eyes of the most dangerous person on the ship. Instead, he gazed at Luffy with a hopeful gaze. "Since I have already sent you and your friends here, can you let me go?" Luffy shrugged his shoulders. "Yeah, sure." "Really?" Feeling easily touched, the centaur was grateful to Luffy. "As someone from the worst generation, you're quite nice." "Worst generation? What's that?" Luffy asked with a question mark floating above his head. "You don't know?" Brownbeard looked at Luffy in disbelief, before staring at Zoro. "Aren't you also one of them?" "I am?" was the green-haired man's only response. Most of the Straw Hats were more focused on training than keeping up to date with the world affairs for these past 2 years, mainly Luffy and Zoro. Robin, who had been staying with the Revolutionary Army, might be the only person who always kept up with everything that was going on. So she kindly explained to the others about the worst generation. In short, the worst generation was a title used to refer to the 11 supernovas that also included Luffy and Zoro. Other than these 11 people, There were also Naru and Ace. Basically, these 13 people were the most troublesome individuals that have happened to exist at the same time. Therefore, although Naru was not even a pirate, she was also included in the list since she was a part of the new generation. Once Robin was done, Brownbeard also gave a short explanation of how he ended up on this island. It turned out that he and his crew were unlucky enough to encounter one of the members of the worst generation, Basil Hawkins. Losing the use of his legs after losing to Hawkins, he then ended up on Punk Hazard. It wasn't until the arrival of Trafalgar Law, another member of the worst generation, did he obtain his crocodile legs. He loathed the worst generation because of Basil Hawkins, and he only tolerated Law's presence since Law was the one who gave him and everyone else their new legs. So those centaurs we encountered earlier are not really centaurs? Usopp came to a conclusion. You think Law can turn me into a centaur if I ask him nicely? Luffy asked with interest. You better drop that idea, said Nami. So Law was the one who cut you into 3 parts? Sanji looked at Kinemon. I do not know the name of the person who assaulted me, but this Law should be him. The samurai responded with a frown. Not talking for a while now, Naru was curious about one thing. What exactly is the relationship between Law and your boss? What is he doing here? I'm not sure either. That guy just appeared one day and has been staying here since then. He doesn't seem to work for Master since he doesn't do any work around here like anyone here. I see. She nodded and didn't say more. Suddenly, one of the big kids cried out in pain as he dropped down to his knees, alerting everyone. Oi kid, what's wrong with you? Asked a worried Usopp who was the closest to him. Call Chopper! Luffy shouted, and just then, something unexpected occurred yet again, when a rain of bullets suddenly headed towards them. Realizing that they were suddenly under attack with many bullets coming at them, Naru was the first one to react. She calmly jumped into action by throwing a strong punch in the direction of the bullets, which caused a huge gust of wind to manifest and deflect the incoming bullets back to where they came from, which was somewhere in the mountains. The sudden turn of events caused everyone to panic. We are under attack. Protect the children. Another batch of bullets were shot at them, and Naru couldn't help but to feel slightly impressed by the sheer size of the bullet, which was as big as the screaming Brownbeard's forearm. The enemies were definitely not ordinary people. With a quick glance, she saw Luffy inflating himself into a huge balloon to bounce off the bullets. There were also Zoro, Brook and Kinemon who worked together to deflect and cut those bullets into 2 with their swords. Frankie was seen protecting some of the defenseless kids with his body, while Sanji, Usopp, Nami and Robin were using their own abilities to either fend off the attacks or protect themselves and everyone else with what they had. There are so many of them. This is unending, Nami cried out. She barely managed to avoid getting her head shot. They must be Caesar's men. Sanji clicked his tongue in annoyance. He glared at the anxious Brownbeard who tried to avoid having bullets shot through his body. Oi you! Who are the people sent by that damn Caesar this time? Being one of them, you must have known about this, right? Being accused for something that he wasn't even aware of, Brownbeard felt like he wanted to cry but had no tears. He shook his head in denial and said, I don't know anything. And Master would never send people to attack this ship when I am also here. After all, Master is kind and he will never put his people in danger. At the same time, more children seemed to be in pain, and Chopper finally decided to come out from the infirmary. However, instead of being surprised by the sudden ambush, he seemed to be quite angry and worried as he went to a nearby crying kid and asked with a strong sense of urgency in his voice. What are you guys normally doing at this hour? Sniff. Usually, we would have a checkup. Sniff, and then Master would give us candy to feel better. Sniff. Chopper? What's wrong? Nami asked in concern, but he ignored everyone and went straight to Brownbeard amidst the chaos. You! Tell me what you know about what that bastard Caesar has done to the children right now. I am just a guard outside, so I have no idea what usually happens inside the facility. But I'll look at the children, they look so ill. So it means that they are really sick, right? Master is kind to give them free medicine and treatment, but you people decided to take them and look at the result. They are in so much pain. Just return them to Master to get their medicine, If not, they would probably die out here. Chopper grew angrier at what Brownbeard had said in his stupid blind loyalty to his kind-hearted master. Medicine, you say? Then how come I managed to detect a trace of drugs in their bodies? Drug? Chopper then gave a short explanation of what he discovered. The only reason why he managed to recognize the drug was because only a few selected scientists and doctors were able to get this type of stimulant drug, which included Dr. Kureha. Since Caesar himself was a capable scientist, it was no surprise that he could get his hand on the drug. The only infuriating thing about the whole thing was that, why did he use the drug on these innocent children? More children started to fall as they cried out in pain that made even the usually stone-hearted Zoro to be worried over them. Especially after Chopper mentioned that these kids would continuously be in pain until their next intake of the drug. Didn't they say that they would eat candy to feel better? Why don't we just give them the candy? Don't we have any candy around here? No? If the candy that can make them feel better is inside that building, then let's go and get some, suggested Luffy, who was still bouncing off some bullets. No! Chopper expressed his refusal strongly. They can't have that candy again. I suspect that they must have been fed the drug through those candies. One of the big children who was in a withdrawal state asked for candy, only to be refused firmly. Realizing that he couldn't get the candy that would free him of this horrible pain, his face turned from pain and desperation to anger real quick, scaring away the other kids. Sind, you look so scary right now. What is wrong with you? The kid whose name was Sind ignored his friends and suddenly started to attack everyone in his sight. Soon after that, the other kids who were in pain like him also went into a rampaging mode. The odd thing was that only the big-sized children were being violent, but not the smaller and normal-sized ones. Due to the size of their bodies, their strength wasn't small either. They are going to destroy the ship at this rate. Someone, do something! Screamed Nami, who just avoided a huge fist coming at her. Thankfully, there was Usopp, who took an immediate action. I got it! He took out something from his bag and shot it towards the violent children, causing them to be covered in smoke. Sleeping Star. Once the smoke was cleared away, the children were seen snoring as they were put into a deep slumber, and only then did they all sigh in relief. Though, not for long, as they were still under attack. Now that the children's matter had been settled, it was time to take care of the enemies. Having made her decision, Nera decided to handle them. All of you stay here and take care of them, she said, before using the wind to lift up her body and fly towards the direction of the snowy mountain. Nei-chan, wait for me. Not wanting to be left out, Luffy stretched out his arms and grabbed the waist of his older sister and pulled himself towards her. Thankfully, she was stable enough in the sky so that they wouldn't fall when Luffy crashed into her. Shishishishi. I want to fight some people too, he said with his trademark smile. In response, she shook her head with a helpless smile. It didn't take long for her to detect the exact whereabouts of the enemies. Upon landing, Luffy got off of her and started to look around, ready to show off his fighting skills. However, the siblings weren't expecting to see two humanoid figures with white fur covering their whole selves to be lying down on the snowy ground. The two figures also had their bodies split into two with no sign of blood in sight, and there were also several pieces of broken weapons around them. However, they were still alive. Oh, there was also a lone man in a long black coat standing on top on the heads as he sheathed his sword. Obviously, he was the one responsible for the state of these two humanoid furry figures. Damn you, traitor! One of them shouted as the other one groaned in pain. Looking at the siblings without any expression, he ignored the cries of pain from the two and jumped down from the head, heading towards them. Oh? It's you! If Luffy could recognize this man, then Nero also could. She couldn't care less about the two fallen victims of the man since she knew that they were the ones who had been shooting at them not too long ago. Instead, she focused on the man. Trafalgar Law, I didn't expect to have our first meeting in this kind of situation. When Law stopped a few meters away from the siblings, he said those two are the Yeti brothers, assassins sent by Caesar to eliminate the Straw Hat crew. Luffy was angry and swore that he would beat Caesar black and blue as revenge for shooting them for no reason. After he was done being angry, He suddenly remembered something and started to talk to Law. Tragai, though I was hoping to be the one to beat them, still, thanks for helping us. You're a good guy after all. Oh, I heard that you're the one who gave the Croco guy his crocodile legs. Can you do the same to me? Law. Naru. Are you seriously asking him to turn you into a centaur right now? Can't I? Drop the idea and this sister will show you some great magic later. Okay. The simple and honest Luffy was happy with that. Law. With the smiling Luffy being obediently quiet beside her, Naru collected her emotions and looked at Law. Trafalgar Law, I don't think Caesar would be happy if he finds out about this, she said with a look of doubt. If you're wondering if Caesar knows about you being here, then the answer is no. For now, only I am aware that you're here. Only you? Naru gave him a mocking smile. Instantly, a powerful burst of power escaped from her body, which she controlled and directed to the still conscious Yeti brothers. Coughing off blood, the brothers soon fainted. Now there's only you. Although her killing intent was directed at the Yeti brothers, even Law and Luffy weren't spared. The latter was still fine as he was somewhat used to his older sister's killing intent ever since they were kids, especially when she was sparring with Garp and that old man always demanded her to attack him like she wanted to kill him. As for Law, his body trembled and he started to let out a cold sweat, despite being out in the cold weather. So this is just a small fragment of her power, Law thought as he tried to calm his anxiously beating heart. Tell me, what is your purpose for doing this? Surely you didn't help us out of the goodness of your heart, HM? Caesar would be sad if he were to know that his friend just betrayed him. Though she was being sarcastic, Law didn't show any sign of being angered or annoyed. Instead, he calmly spoke his mind. I wish to join your side. Huh. Well, that was unexpected. She was bewildered by the sudden development, but Naru was still Naru. She was still calm and collected as she stared into his eyes that were full of determination. Though somewhat interested, she still expressed her doubt. Why? Are you not with Doflamingo? You are quite bold to betray your master, and even wish to switch sides. Law's face remained calm, but the fluctuation of his emotions couldn't escape her. Especially after somebody's name was mentioned. Interesting. It seemed that his relationship with his supposed boss wasn't as good as she originally expected. In front of her, the man closed his eyes and took a couple of deep breaths. When she sensed that he was calm enough, Law opened his eyes and finally spoke, but what he said was something she least expected. My full name is Trafalgar D. Waterlaw. He suddenly introduced himself, and Naru noted that one similarity that they shared in their names. However, she didn't understand anything one bit. Obviously she was asking a different question, then why did he announce his full name, and even look like he had just managed to satisfy her curiosity? I see. She managed to utter after a few moments. Crossing her arms, she coldly said, If you have something to say, then say it now. You're wasting our time, and we still have other places to go and things to do. Law understood that he only got this chance to express his sincerity. When I was young, my parents had always told my younger sister and I about the story of an old kingdom. He started, and the two siblings quietly listened to his unexpected storytelling in the middle of the falling snow. The story went like this. Once upon a time, there once existed a powerful kingdom that earned the respect and admiration of everyone. In that prosperous kingdom, there lived a royal family that was deeply loved by their loyal subjects. The most special thing about this royal family was the divine power that they possessed. It was power that allowed the family to see the future. Even though there could only be one person from each generation, regardless of gender, to inherit the divine power, other members of the family, both young and old, had never harbored the horrible feeling of envy and jealousy over the chosen one. Instead, all of them were quite protective of the chosen one, and even the citizens considered that whoever might inherit the blessing of heaven would be the one to sit on the throne next. Man or woman? The gender was never an issue. Therefore, if the chosen one was born a girl, she shall be the next supreme ruler of the kingdom. The influence of this kingdom was very strong, no matter if it was about their military power or the strong stability of their economy. The kingdom had always been known to the rest of the world as the #1 kingdom in the entire world for many years. The influence of the kingdom and the royal family, who had the divine power that was believed a blessing from heaven, had even caused the language that they created to be spoken and used by everyone from all over the world until today. Even the calendar that was used today was also because of this kingdom. That was because the year 1 in the Kainrenki calendar was the beginning of the kingdom, and was also considered to be the beginning of a new era, a new world. However, as much as there were many who loved, admired, and respected the kingdom and its royal family, there were bound to be those who envied, feared, and hated them. The kingdom's prosperity and the lavish life of the royal family caused a wave of jealousy and hatred from other rulers of other kingdoms. They were jealous that they decided to form a secret alliance, and together, they plotted the demise of the kingdom. Another thing that drove their desire to destroy the kingdom was their sense of fear and paranoia of the possibility that their kingdoms might be oppressed and suppressed completely by that kingdom. Hence, all 20 other powerful kingdoms of their own strength had joined forces together to eradicate that kingdom. Thus, existed a day when a once great kingdom suddenly perished from the face of the earth. Even though this kingdom was considered to be the most powerful, even a lone kingdom wouldn't be able to protect itself from the combined attacks of 20 other kingdoms. In the end, that lone kingdom fell into ruin. The royal family had this one certain thing about them that distinguished them from ordinary people, in which they had the lone initial D as their middle name. Before they and the kingdom had completely collapsed, the king used his power as the supreme ruler to bless his loyal citizens and allowed them to have the same initial D in their name. It was supposed to be proof that they belonged to the kingdom, and that they and their future descendants would inherit the will of the royal family. The king's last words were not about how he was grateful to have loyal subjects such as them, or how sorry and regretful he was for failing them. Instead, he told everyone of how the myths and legends that have been passed down from their ancestors were all true. One day, someone special would appear among their future descendants, and the kingdom shall rise once again with the power of the Chosen One. With their belief and faith in the royal family, the survivors with their newly obtained names finally escaped from the burning kingdom with a heavy heart, but also with new flaming hope and determination. Young and old, the survivors were hunted. Once they were caught, death was their only escape from the clutch of the evildoers. Forced to live in the shadow, they only lived to survive until that day came as they passed down the tales of the royal family, the kingdom, and the words spoken by the last king of the Chosen One who would appear among their descendants. Other than waiting for that person to appear, they also had the firm belief that their descendants would one day be led by the Chosen One to rob back the glory of their old kingdom from the evildoers. But sadly, day by day, as time passed, many of them have started to forget. Only those who were truly loyal to the old kingdom and the royal family still continued to pass down their belief to their children. And among those people were Law's parents. My parents had always reminded me to never reveal my full name to anyone or speak the old story to just anyone. Even before they died, they still managed to remind me one last time about their faith and belief and how I shall inherit their will and pass it down to my future heir. Law ended his story with a somewhat dazed look. Nobody spoke as Naru was busy trying to sort out her thoughts after what Law had just revealed. On the other hand, Luffy had long given up listening to Law. The boy was now whistling, and while trying his best to build a snowman. Law glanced at the carefree Luffy and the corner of his twitch as he resisted the urge to express his annoyance for being ignored. However, Monkey D. Luffy's opinion didn't matter, as the woman in front of him was the one that he wanted to convince. After sorting out her thoughts, Nara finally opened her mouth. Let me guess, the 20 kingdoms in your story, they are now known as the world government, aren't they? Law nodded. And we, she referred to the 3 of them in the area as the descendants of that old kingdom, are meant to oppose the world government, the evildoers in your story? Is that it? Law nodded once again. I see. Honestly, she believed him. She didn't even doubt his words, because she could feel that he was being truthful ever since the beginning. She was a person that was most familiar with all these superstitious things, beliefs, and predictions of the future. Heck, she was even the child of prophecy in her past life, so she believed in this Chosen One as well. Plus, she also remembered that Garp had once said something about how everyone with the D in their name actually originated from the same place a long time ago. There was her father, who was busy leading an entire army to go against the world government, which gave some credibility to Law's story. After all, Dragon had never revealed the reason behind his action. She had only assumed that he merely had a huge sense of justice and loathed the cruelty of the world nobles. Thinking of her father, she wondered if Dragon was actually aware of the whole D thing. Was that why he was so hell-bent in fighting against the world government? If he was aware of it, then he must have gotten the beliefs from Garp, as what was said by Law earlier about how parents would pass down their beliefs to their children. Also, if the beliefs and words of that king were so important to his people like Law's parents did, then how come either Garp or Dragon had never mentioned anything about these things to her and her brothers when they were children? Okay, perhaps Dragon, who was mostly absent in their life, was not someone they could count on for this kind of thing, but Garp, that old geezer? Besides that one time when he told them that they all originated from the same place, he never mentioned anything else either. Not only that, if the world government was the enemy of their people, then how come that old man could join the Marine and still be able to climb his way up into being a vice admiral despite having his real name exposed and later known by everyone? And opposing the world government? Although she didn't plan to wipe out the entire world government to get revenge for an old kingdom that had already perished for hundreds of years, she still couldn't but to feel slightly disturbed and weird that she was unconsciously fulfilling her role and sense of duty by becoming the enemy of the world government like her father did. Even in this life, she couldn't escape from that thing called destiny, huh? Shaking her head, she decided to think more about this matter later. For now, she must deal with Law first. He may have been honest, but his unspoken intention? That was what she wanted to figure out. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked him. Law was startled, but he was ready to answer. "Our existence." Naru raised her hand, which stopped him from talking further. "Save your breath if you want to speak about what my father is currently doing and how we are picking a fight with the world government, because that is what we are destined to do." The tip of his ears flushed red a little bit because that was exactly what he wanted to say. Naru ignored his reaction and continued. "If you're thinking of trying to lure me in with your little story, then you're bound to be disappointed, because I care little about the history. Why should I be concerned about an old ruined kingdom? Unlike my father, I have no thought of overthrowing the world government just because some people in the past expected me to do so. Quite frankly, I like how things are now. So why do I have to seek trouble just because of an old prediction?" It didn't matter if the prophecy was real or not, but she absolutely refused to have any part in any predestined scenario. Whoever the chosen one was, they could deal with the predictions themselves. As a certain lazy genius would say in this kind of situation, troublesome. And Naru hated troublesome things. Be quick with your words, and you better choose your words wisely, because whether you're lying or not, I will know. So don't even bother trying to lie. Law contemplated for a while. He didn't lie when he said that he wanted to join her side, and he understood what it meant to join her side. He had already considered everything when he figured out that Monkey D. Naru was actually here, and he knew that in order to gain her trust, he would have to show her a great sincerity. "I'm not working for that man," he finally spoke. "In the past, it might be so, but not anymore. I am also not working with Caesar like what you are thinking. I'm here with a presence." Naru raised her eyebrow. "And that is?" "To bring down Doflamingo," he coldly declared. "Oh ho?" Here was a man with an ambition to take down Doflamingo when there was also another person with the same goal. Was this a coincidence, or did they have something to do with each other? Staring at those eyes full of resentment, Naru could only think of one reason as to why Law was here. "Let me guess." She gave him a knowing smile. "You are here for the sad, aren't you? Or perhaps you are here to capture Caesar and use him to threaten Doflamingo? Other than these reasons, I failed to think of any other logical reason for you to be here." Law wasn't surprised that she seemed to know about the sad. If she knew about the sad, then there was a chance she was aware of what he was about to say next, which made things easier for him to explain. "I'll assume that you know about the production of artificial devil fruits by Doflamingo, and how he supplies those things to Kaido." She nodded. Even without him explaining further, she was already able to construct his whole plan in her head. Caesar was an important figure in the business between Doflamingo and Kaido. As the only person in the entire world that knew how to make the most important ingredient to produce smile, which was a name used to call those fake devil fruits, Doflamingo held Caesar in a very important position. Without Caesar, there would be no sad, which meant that Doflamingo would not be able to produce more smiles for Kaido. If Doflamingo failed to provide the Yonko more smiles for his crew, the one who would have to bear the brunt of the Yonko's wrath would be Doflamingo alone. Law's goal was to use Kaido's rage to eliminate Doflamingo. As to why he was telling her about being the descendants of the old kingdom that she didn't even know the name of, and the supposed role that they should play according to the so-called beliefs, it wasn't hard for her to figure out the reason why. If it wasn't to borrow her power to deal with his enemy, then what else? In this matter, she would have to inquire whether he was in cahoot with a certain princess or not. Though she wasn't sure what her role would be in his plan, she was willing to humor him for the moment, just because he had been honest this entire time. Well then, let's say I'm willing to accept you, then what can you offer me? She asked while crossing her arms. My loyalty, Law declared. I only ask for your protection over my crew from Doflamingo and Kaido if something were to happen to me. And get myself into a troublesome conflict with Kaido for someone significant like you? He might be a Shichibukai, but to her, his title meant nothing. Law clenched his fist that wasn't used to hold his sword, but he couldn't even be angry over her words because he was indeed insignificant in her eyes. He was only anxious and worried that she would reject him immediately. And since she was already aware of the whole sad and smile thing, then he couldn't even use his knowledge about Doflamingo's weakness to convince her to let him join her side. And although he had already revealed to her about what his parents had told him repeatedly about their sense of duty, she wasn't interested either. The reason why he chose to join her side was precisely because she was his best bet to keep his crew safe if something were to go wrong with his plan. It never crossed his mind to involve someone like her in his plans since he never thought that he would have the chance to even have an encounter with her. Her appearance here at this time was such a blessing that he started to plan on how to gain her trust and convince her to back him up. I will keep our interaction and connection a secret from the world. And as one of your followers, you're welcome to order me to do something for you. Nara considered the pros and cons if she were to accept this man as one of her people, and decided that it wouldn't be a bad idea to take him in. Actually, she wouldn't mind letting him join her since they both had a similar goal anyway. And since he had said it himself that he would keep their interaction and connection a secret, this would actually benefit her more. She always welcomed more people to be her extra eyes and ears. Reaching out her hand for a handshake, she smiled. Well then, I welcome you to my side, I guess? Staring at that slender hand, he was a little bit surprised that she agreed so easily, although this was what he tried to achieve. But a small voice in his head was telling him that he was falling into a trap, and he still hadn't realized a single thing. Taking her hand and giving a small handshake, he expressed his goodwill as well. Now that both of them had come into an agreement, Nara thought that their matter here was settled and was ready to proceed to their next stage. But Law didn't seem to be done yet as he turned his attention to Luffy, who was oblivious of what his older sister and Law had been talking about. I also have something to say to you, Straw Hat. Luffy, who was making a snowball, reacted when he was called. HM? When the siblings returned back to the ship, the others were surprised since they didn't expect for them to have brought another person that they least expected. Especially Kinemon, who had a bad encounter with said person. However, Law's appearance was not the thing that shocked them the most. What shocked everyone the most, mainly the Straw Hats, was the sudden announcement of an unexpected alliance with Law by none other than Luffy, the captain and the one who had agreed to the alliance himself. Back to what happened after Nara had agreed to Law's proposal, the Shichibukai also proposed an alliance between his crew and the Straw Hat crew with the ultimate goal to take down Kaido, since both captains had the ambition to become the next pirate king. And also because Law knew that Luffy was not the type to bow down and willing to work under someone else. In the end, Luffy agreed with enthusiasm. To be honest, the only reason why Luffy even agreed to this unexpected alliance was because their target was not Shanks, much to Nara's amusement. Despite thinking that it was still too early for both captains to even think of touching Kaido at their current level, she chose not to interfere with their matter. And as to why she didn't try to stop the alliance when asked by the almost hysterical Nami and Usopp, her only answer was that she wasn't a pirate. Anyway, the sudden alliance between the two crew was actually not bad. After Luffy agreed to the alliance, Naru then began to explain to Law what they actually, Naru and Straw Hats, planned to do. She told him about how they were originally going to meet up with Ace and Yuzu, who were already in Dressrosa for the tournament, the upcoming rebellion, and how they ended up here because of the distress call, which led to Nara making a decision to capture Caesar so that she could use him as Doflamingo's weakness. Now that Law was aware that someone who was more capable than him also had the same goal as him, he was naturally delighted and was even more willing to follow what Nara would be planning to do next. But she herself didn't have an exact plan, since she said that she would decide once they arrived in Dressrosa. Although he had confidence in Nara's abilities, he still couldn't help but to feel worried since Doflamingo was still a part of the world government, in which Nara responded. "What are you worried about? You said it yourself, that we are meant to defy the world government anyway." And Law could do nothing but to let himself be easily convinced by her words. After all, even though he did have the intention to develop a kinship with her using their heritage for his own sake, what he didn't say to her was that he also felt the same way as his parents did before they fell to their death. After the topic of the alliance was done, they moved on to the topic of their current situation. Anyway, they would talk about their next plan once they succeeded in catching Caesar. Law also provided them with the info of the kid's circumstance, and how they were used as a guinea pig in Caesar's inhuman experiment to turn a normal human into a giant, which infuriated everyone greatly. Even Nara wasn't able to control her facial expression at the thought of these children suffering at the hands of that madman. Brownbeard, who had been captured and tied up once again because Sanji didn't trust him, was also slapped in the face with the harsh reality that his so-called kind-hearted master was actually a horrible monster. When Law mentioned that there might be an antidote for the children kept somewhere in Caesar's office, Chopper instantly jumped to his feet and volunteered to follow Nara's group into the building with a reason that he might be able to identify which one was the real antidote just to be safe. "You might want to know this." Law's expression turned serious as he looked at Naru. "But Caesar has been getting stranger ever since I saw him earlier." "How strange?" Law recalled that time when he was just done dealing with the Marines. He immediately went to see Caesar. However, on his way to the office, he saw how there were many people suddenly starting to move around suspiciously in the building, carrying some stuff with them. When he asked one of them what they were doing, the only response he got was that Caesar told them to clean up. As for the reason, even they didn't know. When he confronted Caesar about it, he was told not to worry about it. Though he was wary of what exactly the mad scientist was about to do, Law remained calm as usual as to not appear suspicious. They talked about the recent event for a bit, and other than telling him a not-so-sincere good job and about the Yeti brothers that he ordered to keep the Straw Hats busy for a while without the intention to harm them for fear of offending the Uzukage by killing her baby brother, Law was then asked to leave. The entire time, he didn't even ask about the Marines. "Cleaning up? You guys don't think that he's trying to escape, right?" Silence. What if he is indeed planning to run away? Well then, Nara stood up from her seat. "Now we have more reason to move now, right? And don't worry. As long as I'm here, nobody can escape from this place." Following their original plan, but this time with an extra man and one furry animal, Team Nara left the ship and followed Law to the back entrance. Infiltrating the facility with ease, they decided to split up. Luffy and Kinemon would go ahead to search for the missing Momonosuke. Law would bring Chopper into Caesar's office to look for the antidote. As for Naru, nobody knew what she was planning to do as she disappeared into the darkness. Right now, Law was bringing along a sack that was tied to the end of his sword, which also contained one quiet Chopper inside. Since Chopper was small and they wanted to avoid attention from others, Law thought that this was a good solution. When Law entered the office, he saw Monet sitting alone at her usual spot at the counter, seemingly to be busy writing something. "Good, Caesar is not around. If you're looking for Master, then he's not here," Monet said suddenly. She didn't pause what she was doing to see the person entering, but she knew that it was Law anyway since he was the only one other than the master and her who was allowed to be inside. Where did he go? In a natural way, Law placed the sack on the floor quietly behind the couch while Monet was still not looking. Who knows? Knowing him, he should be outside messing with some poor people. Good. With him not here, it will give us plenty of time to complete our task, he thought to himself. But to Monet, he said, I've been around the island and I've also seen everything I want to see, so I'm planning to leave soon. Really? That's too bad. It would be nice if you could stay here a little bit longer. This time, she finally abandoned what she was doing, turning to look at Law with a charming smile. Unfortunately, Law was a man who didn't care about a woman's beauty enough to be distracted from his goal. Ignoring the subtle shaking of the sack behind the couch, he said to Monet, I want to borrow your ability for a bit. Can you come with me for a while? Oh my, is this a date? She asked with a playful smile, but was ignored by him with his usual stone expression. Even so, she wasn't offended. Such a cold man, what is it that you need me for? You'll understand when we get there. He turned his body around and led the flying woman outside of the room. Unnoticed by him, Monet turned her head slightly to gaze at the quivering little sack hidden behind the couch with a small smile, before she purposely ignored it and followed after Law with a small hum. Now with just the two of them alone in the hallway, Law was thinking how he should deal with Monet. But before he could even think of a plan, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. It was as though someone was squeezing out his heart. It was so painful that he immediately dropped to the cold floor. What's wrong? You look like you're in pain. Monet hovered over him with a concerned gaze. Just then, footsteps could be heard and Law immediately became tense. Meanwhile, Monet's concerned gaze slowly disappeared into a teasing smile as a figure came out from the darkness. Monet wasn't the only one who recognized the person who suddenly showed up. What are you doing here? The person standing before him, staring down at him as if he was the trash that didn't worth any attention, was someone that Law knew from his past. You've grown, Law, the man said, having his hands placed behind him in a comfortable but overbearing manner. How many years has it been? Law glared at him. Even though you're not a brat anymore, you're still quite naive, aren't you? Did you really think that he had no idea about you being here at all? We never trusted Caesar from the beginning. That's why Monet is here to monitor him and everything under the order of the young master. And you're quite famous now, being a Shichibukai and all. When did you get here, Virgo? Law hissed in pain. Because the pain came so suddenly, and he was sure that this man was the one responsible for what just happened, Law was wary and didn't try to move as he liked. Just now, Virgo answered. I just happened to be at Dressrosa earlier. So he told me to come here to get Caesar and you as well. As for the straw hats, Monet, what about them? Since the young master said to not touch them and just let them leave the island if they wanted, we didn't actually do anything to cause them harm. But Caesar did send the Yeti brothers to keep them busy as we are cleaning up around this place. The available sad is already ready to be delivered. Law clenched his fists. They were indeed planning to escape. If Caesar managed to leave before they could catch him, then their plan would be ruined. It would be meaningless if Caesar was in Dressrosa because he would be under heavy protection there. Why are you doing this to me? I haven't done anything to harm you, have I? You would be dead by now if you had. Even if you tried to hide things from us, the adults will find out eventually, Law. Then I'll just have to make you disappear, Law declared as he struggled to get back on his feet. The standing duo weren't fazed by the sheer display of determination shown by him. Monet just chuckled bemusedly as Virgo raised his weapon that had been covered by hockey and was ready to hit the younger man when he suddenly felt something hit the back of his knees, causing him to fall forward with his knees meeting the cold floor. Who's there? Monet flapped her wings and nervously looked behind her but saw no one. She looked back at Virgo, who was kneeling, and was shocked when she saw a pair of strange knives were deeply stabbed at the back of his knees, causing blood to flow out. Seeing the opportunity in front of him, Law instantly recovered from his state of shock and started to slash Virgo into several pieces just like how he did to Kinneyman earlier. Lol. You. Monet stumbled upon her words and was about to use her power to deal with Law, but went stiff when she felt a hand touch her shoulder. She turned her head around slightly, and was frozen in fear when her golden eyes met with a glaring pair of red eyes. And Monet screamed. Chapter 30, Punk Hazard v. When Law heard Monet's sudden scream, he had just finished dealing with Virgo. He turned around to look at what happened and couldn't help but to be shocked at what he saw. Why? Because of all the things that went through his head at that moment, none of them was about the sudden appearance of one Monkey D. Naru who had just appeared from out of nowhere. He clearly didn't expect to see his new boss so soon after they had just gone their separate way not too long ago. The woman had Monet staring dazedly into her eyes with a pale and terrified face that Law had never seen on the face of the winged woman before. In Law's point of view, the two women were just staring at each other without saying any word. The green-haired woman was on her knees, while the black-haired woman was standing before her as she stared down at Monet. Suddenly, Monet closed her eyes as she fell to the floor, unconscious. When the Yuzakage turned to stare at him, Law was surprised to see a pair of glaring red eyes instead of the calm sapphire blue. He also flinched when he was suddenly exposed to the cold and suffocating aura coming from her. However, despite his natural instinct of wanting to escape from a dangerous predator, he remained still on his spot with several drops of sweat running down the sides of his face. The woman was staring at him just like how she did to Monet just a few moments ago. She was staring right into his eyes as if she was trying to look deeper into his soul to judge whatever sins that he had committed in his life. His instinct was telling him that if he moved his gaze away from her now, he would regret it. Therefore, he stayed still on his spot. Even if he wanted to move away, his body refused to listen to him. It was as though there were several invisible chains trapping him there and unable him to move. Thankfully for his own peace of mind, the staring contest didn't last for that long as her pressuring aura suddenly disappeared like it was never there. Her eyes also slowly turned back to their original color as she allowed a small innocent smile to appear on her face. He almost let out a sigh of relief. What was that all about? Was he being tested just now? He couldn't help but to wonder. Even if they were now on the same side, Law had to admit that Monkey D. Naru was one terrifying individual. Even her aura alone was enough to subdue him and strike fear into his whole self. What's wrong? You look like you have just seen a ghost. Did I frighten you? She asked with a light smile. I just didn't expect to see you this soon. He grimaced at how awkward he sounded at the moment. Sorry for the sudden appearance, but I saw that you seemed to be struggling against these two, so I decided to come out and lend a hand, she claimed as she walked past Monet, who was like a lifeless doll on the floor. When he looked at Monet, he couldn't help but to wonder whether the green-haired woman was frightened by the Yuzakage so badly that she actually fainted out of fear. Recalling the awful feeling that he himself had experienced earlier, Law almost shuddered physically and was thankful that he made the right choice in joining the Yuzakage's side. If not, he didn't have any doubt that he would also end up like Monet. His eyes then wandered to the two weirdly shaped knives that were deeply stabbed at the back of Virgo's knees. They were so deeply stuck into his flesh that the only thing that could be seen was their long handle with a loophole design at the top. It was quite impressive at how fast those knives were flying at their target without making any sound until the target himself was hit. Thanks to that, Law managed to grab the opportunity and fight back against his opponent. At the same time, he also wondered if the blue-eyed woman had always been somewhere, observing everything from the beginning, since none of them had managed to detect her presence until she chose to show herself. He couldn't help but to wonder whether she would remain undetected in the dark if he wasn't forced to be in a disadvantageous situation. Law gave it a thought, and his eye twitched. The possibility was quite high. Naru glanced at the severed head not far from where they stood and said, "I didn't expect to see this man here." Law looked at her, surprised. "You know him?" "I paid enough attention to the world government to know of him," she answered simply. "When I encountered him earlier, he was being all suspicious, so I decided to follow after him. Good thing I did so, HM?" Under her gaze, Law had no comment. Earlier, as she was wandering around the facility doing her own things, she suddenly detected a strong and foreign presence from somewhere inside the building. Heart filled with suspicion, she then decided to look for the person, only to see a man in white coat that she instantly recognized with just a glance. As she had been keeping a close eye on the world government, it was unavoidable for her to also pay attention to those capable people in the Marine Force as well. And this man who seemed like he knew his way around the facility was also one of those people that she had taken note of due to his position as a vice admiral. Coincidentally, he was also the leader of the unit that Smoker was currently in. Since Luffy had once talked about Smoker during their first reunion 2 years ago, it was only natural for her to pay close attention to those that her brothers had mentioned before. And it just so happened that this person that she was secretly following after was also included in the social circle of Smoker, hence why Nara could recognize him with just a glance. That person was none other than Virgo, a vice admiral and the leader of G5. The only question that she had when she first saw him was that, why was this person here, seemingly relaxed and unbothered while his other comrades were suffering in the cold outside? What a suspicious man. Taking advantage of her superior strength, she had her presence completely concealed as she continued to tail him from the shadow like a proper ninja. In the end, she eventually saw the friendly interaction between Law, Virgo and Monet. "So you have been there since the beginning?" Law inwardly grimaced at the thought of letting her see his somewhat pathetic self. However, Law considered that he wasn't really at fault there. He knew that he would still be able to handle both Monet and Virgo if he was being careful enough. But unfortunately, he was caught off guard when he was suddenly being attacked by a sudden sharp pain in his chest. Recalling that moment, his eyes darkened as he stared at Virgo. A strange thought then went through his head. Could it be Virgo, who wasn't dead yet despite having his head being cut off from his body, was able to hear the conversation of the two people? "Who are you?" he asked. Although he was beaten by Law, just like the Shichibukai and Monet, he too experienced the suffocating presence of the unknown person. That should be what affected him the most right now. A trail of blood could be seen at the corner of his lips as he tried to guess the identity of the person who was radiating such a strong overbearing presence that reminded him so much of his young master. If he didn't feel that sudden burst of presence a while ago before it suddenly disappeared like the wind, he would never have thought that there was actually another person besides them here. It was clear that this person, whoever they may be, was way above his level. There were not that many people who could rival Doflamingo's presence. But many faces that went through his head, none could match the idea that someone would be kind enough to help someone like Law. And based on the voice that had spoken to that brat Law, the unknown person was definitely a woman. Her voice sounded vaguely familiar to him as well. However, no matter how hard he tried to recall any woman with a voice like that, nobody came to his mind. "Who are you?" he asked once again, still trying to guess the identity of the person. But without a body to move and his head was also forced to face the ceiling, he had no way of trying to catch a glimpse of the woman. "Who I am is none of your concern," Naru responded. "However, instead of worrying about my identity, it's better for you to worry more about your upcoming fate." Confused by her words, Virgo wasn't ready when he saw a slender hand suddenly appear in his line of sight, nor was he ready for the sudden sharp pain that came the moment that hand touched his head. It was just a normal gentle touch, but the pain that came next gave him the impression that there were thousands of tiny needles stabbed into his head at once at the same time. Helpless, Virgo could do nothing but to grit his teeth as he tried to hold on. However, despite his effort and willpower, he still ended up letting out a groan when he failed to suppress the pain. In the end, he was eventually greeted by the darkness as he lost his consciousness. While Law was taken aback wondering what the heck just happened, Naru, who didn't feel like explaining her action, merely went over to Monet next. Under Law's curious gaze, she then proceeded to press her 2 fingers at a certain spot behind the unconscious woman's neck. This was to make sure that she would remain in that state for a longer time. Before Law could ask what she was doing, Naru spoke first. "These two won't wake up for the time being, so you don't have to worry about this woman waking up and trying to kill you. And as for him," she glanced at the cut-off body parts scattered on the floor, "I don't think you have to worry about him anymore." Then she looked at him. "Anyway, I don't plan to stick around here any longer since I have completed my task as I have been instructed to do. So I'll be going first, and you can handle these two as you see fit. And also, while I have no interest in knowing how you are going to handle them, it's better for them to be alive. You get it? Law opened his mouth, trying to say something but was cut off. Well then, you will see me later. With that, the woman suddenly disappeared in a poof of smoke along with the two kunais that she had thrown at Virgo earlier, which caused more blood to gush out of his wounds. The blank Law could only blink his eyes at the empty air. It turned out, the Naru that had been talking to Law the whole time was just one of the several clones that the real Naru had summoned out before they were scattered throughout the building. At the same time, somewhere in Section C of the facility, Naru stopped walking when she suddenly received a new set of memories from one of her clones that had recently dispelled itself. That clone was precisely the one that had just been with Law earlier. Virgo, huh? What an unexpected fellow, was her only comment regarding the new development before she resumed her movement. Although Virgo's appearance here was truly unexpected, Naru didn't consider it to be such a big concern. After all, hadn't he been dealt with by her clone already? With him being done for, he wasn't a problem to her. Even the woman that was acting as Caesar's assistant was already done for. Hence, the lack of reaction coming from her. Perhaps, the only thing that she was expecting to come was the possible reaction of Smoker and the rest of the Marines once they found out about Virgo. Anyhow, now that her clones were almost done with whatever they were supposed to do, it was now good to say that Caesar Clown was no longer the master of this place. Earlier, as soon as the group had split up with their own task to do, Naru didn't waste time as she immediately summoned several clones to clean up the whole place. And of course, by cleaning up the place, she meant dealing with the rest of Caesar's people in this building and also to find, destroy or sabotage every single form of communication that the enemies might be able to use to contact for some reinforcements. Especially that Doflamingo. She definitely didn't need that man to have his focus on her, Luffy and his crew at the moment. Plus, they would see each other soon eventually. For the time being, she would like to do what she was able to do here without any disturbance from any unwanted problem. Now back to the flashback of what Naru had been up to since earlier. Once she had seen how there were so many things had been packed up and most of the rooms that she had looked into previously were almost being emptied, it seemed that their suspicion was indeed right for saying that Caesar might be planning to leave the island. And he was also in a hurry to do so as well. How could he not? Now that the Marines were here, Caesar's illegal presence and activities on this island might have been already reported to the Marine HQ. Scared of getting caught and thrown into prison, he then decided to abandon this place and run away to save himself. Naru would even bet her entire fortune that he was probably planning on escaping to Doflamingo's place, which was the closest. After all, the crazy Shichibukai would never let a valuable ally like Caesar Clown be harmed or taken away from him. Caesar's existence was equal to his business lifeline and the fate of his life and death. Although she had discovered earlier that Caesar was nowhere to be found in this building and she also had no idea as to where the guy had wandered off to, she was still confident that he would return back sooner or later eventually. Plus, even if he wanted to leave the island now, it would be impossible since there was no available transportation that he could use to bring himself to Dressrosa. Even the two ships that were docked alongside the Thousand Sunny from earlier were destroyed thanks to the sudden ambush from the Yeti brothers. Anyway, she wasn't that worried about Caesar running away for the time being. She would just wait for him here and ambush him when he least expected it. It would be fun to see his helpless reaction once he realized that he couldn't escape from his impending doom anymore. Taking the chance of him not being here, Naru decided to settle everything inside the facility first, which included the rest of Caesar's men, and those many den mushi of all types that could be found anywhere in every part of this building. And as she was also in a hurry to leave this place as soon as possible, she ended up summoning several clones to share her works. By now, half of them had already dispelled themselves once they were done with their task, including the one with Law earlier. Giving a small hum as she thought of their current situation, Naru continued to walk forward. However, a faint presence of someone from somewhere suddenly attracted her attention. Based on the feeling, the person didn't seem to be a dangerous enemy. especially when the person radiated such a strong but weak presence that gave off the feeling of helplessness and desperation. The most interesting thing, however, was that this presence that she felt bore the same feeling as when she first felt Kinemon's presence hours ago. It was the presence of chakra, or to be exact, Ryo. Suddenly, Naru disappeared from her spot. In just a flash, she arrived at a certain hallway, and there at the end, she saw a huge hole on the wall. Despite the little unpleasant smell coming from it, it didn't stop her from getting closer to it. As she got near it, she tilted her head slightly and looked down, but all she could see was total darkness. Even if she wasn't able to see anything with her naked eyes, she was sure that the person she was looking for was down there. A second later, she suddenly jumped into the hole and her body instantly glowed in her golden chakra cloak, which illuminated the whole place as she let herself to fall down freely. When she reached the end, her feet landed gracefully on the floor as she looked around the place that reminded her of the gray terminal back in Goa Kingdom. Her glowing eyes then immediately spotted a little figure that was a few distances away from her. "So there you are," she muttered softly as she proceeded to head towards the little person, whom she later noticed was without any piece of clothing on him as he laid there shivering on the cold, dirty floor with his back against the wall. Naru frowned upon seeing him curling into a ball as he hugged himself with his two frail arms, trying to keep himself warm as he tried to hold on to whatever little energy that he had left. As if sensing that somebody was finally here to take him away from this cold and dark place, the boy slowly opened his eyes slightly and started to mumble something under his breath. But his voice was so soft and quiet that even someone like Naru, who had heightened hearing sense, failed to hear what he was mumbling about. Then she saw how he shakily tried to reach out his little hand towards her direction. Quickening her speed, she eventually reached his side in a blink of an eye before she knelt down with both of her knees on the floor as she reached out her two glowing arms towards the child. She then took him into her embrace and held him like how she often did to Tama and her brothers when they were children. "You're safe now," she murmured softly. "Hold on. Your father is waiting to see you, Mamanosu-kun." Sensing the sudden warmth that enveloped himself, the boy sniffled as he held tightly onto her clothes with his tiny hands, not wanting to let go. He then opened his mouth and mumbled something once again. But this time, Naru could hear it clearly. "Father, I miss you." Then they disappeared, bringing the light out, and the place turned dark once again. In another part of the place, there were Luffy and Kinemon. Although these two were given the task to look for Mamanosuke, in reality, they were actually lost. They had no idea of where they were supposed to go as everything and everywhere looked the same to them, and they didn't even know in which part of the building they were currently at. All they knew was that, ever since everyone had split up a while ago, the duo had been running left and right, up and down, looking into one room after another, and yet they still failed to find even one single kid in this entire damn place. And it couldn't be denied that doing a continuous search without an actual plan was also tiring, and Luffy was even starting to get bored. So the younger man started a random conversation with the samurai. This time, Luffy had just finished boasting about how cool his big brother Ace was for his ability to use fire. "So your big brother is a Katon user? Amazing!" Kinemon exclaimed. "Yeah." Luffy actually had no idea what it was and what it meant, but he agreed anyway since it sounded cool to his ears. "We also have some people in our country who can use Katon, like me. Most of my attacks are fire-based, and because of that, I have been given the title, Foxfire Kinemon," claimed the samurai with pride displayed on his face. "Cool." Luffy had stars in his eyes as he stared at the grinning samurai. "Does that mean that you have a fox as a partner? Can I see it? Can I?" Kinemon suddenly became flustered at the sudden request made by the younger man. He coughed awkwardly before saying foxes are considered to be the sacred creatures of Wano, Luffy Dano. Just touching one is already considered a crime, let alone having one as a pet. How could we treat the creatures of the sun goddess as something like we treat a normal house pet like cats and dogs? Absolutely outrageous. "But my sister has one," said Luffy as he blinked his eyes innocently at Kinemon, who was gaping at him in horror mixed with disbelief. It was as if he couldn't comprehend the thought of someone daring enough to keep a sacred creature as a companion. Although that someone was not even from his land and that nobody from the world outside was even aware of the cultures and beliefs of his people, it still appeared to be quite a surprise to the samurai anyway. Ah, really? Well, since Naruto is not a citizen of Wano, I guess that's fine, replied Kinemon, trying to convince himself that Naru was not a person of Wano. Therefore, she wasn't bound by the strict laws of his country. Nei-chan can glow into golden light too, you know? And her fox too. I didn't see it since I was unconscious at that time, but I was told before that Nei-chan and Kurama were glowing and they even used combined attacks together. How cool was that? Then Luffy proceeded to recite the story that he was told to him by Usopp, the dramatic storyteller, of how his older sister and her fox partner combined their energy balls and shot a big and strong beam of light towards somewhere that had to do with someone called Mary or something. Although there was a huge possibility that it could be exaggerated by Usopp and later by Luffy himself, Kinemon was still amazed. That truly happened? Yeah. What an interesting ability. Then I'll be bold to say that Naruto and her fox are battle partners. Luffy was in a deep thought for a while, before he nodded his head as he recalled that Kurama had always been by his sister's side ever since he came back with her from one of her journeys before they left to the Grand Line together. But how come I haven't seen a single fox around Naruto at all? Questioned the samurai. Usually, an animal battle companion would never left its master's side. And since the brother himself had said that Naruto had a fox as a battle partner, then there should always be a fox by her side. But so far since their first meeting a couple of hours ago, besides the talking raccoon, he hadn't seen any animals around her at all. Oh, I guess Kurama is sleeping at the moment, answered Luffy. And only Nei-chan has the power to summon him out. In truth, he didn't know much about what his sister could do other than the fact that she was a ninja who was a lot stronger and powerful than everyone else he knew. He also didn't know much about Kurama, that fox, but he remembered that Naru had once told him about how Kurama was actually living inside a space that could only be accessed by her. She might have said something else too, but Luffy certainly didn't remember, or he just didn't get it. However, he understood that only Naru could call out Kurama. Ah. So Naruto is a summoner. Kinemon had the look of "now I understand" on his smiling face as he nodded to himself. So this Kurama is not actually a real fox, but instead a fox spirit from the spirit realm. How fortunate! Huh? A spirit? Kinemon continued to speak. In my country, there are not that many people that can use summoning jutsu. Those who can are called summoners. Most of them are able to summon a spirit animal from the spirit realm, however, although summoners are rare, summoners who can summon a fox spirit are even rarer. Why is that so? I'm glad you asked, Luffy Dano. Kinemon was more than happy to explain why a fox was considered a sacred creature of his homeland. You see, our people believe that foxes are the animal companion of our goddess. Anything that has to do with a fox symbolizes the power and presence of our goddess. Goddess? Is she really that strong? I think I met someone who called himself a god before, Luffy said as he tried to recall his vague memories of this god. He didn't remember much, but he did remember that the guy had extremely long earlobes and used lightning, causing troubles for his crew and the people from the Sky Island. You met a god? Kinemon couldn't help but to stare at the younger man with a trace of disbelief in his eyes. Yeah, he was really strong too, but I still managed to beat him anyway. Shishishishi. A god that can be defeated by a mere mortal? Kinemon couldn't help but to look at the young man beside him from head to toe, before shrugging his shoulders as he came to his own conclusion. Must be a fraud then. How could a mere mortal beat a divine being so easily? Then he continued. According to the samurai, ever since the country was first established more than 1,000 years ago by the first shogun of Wano, the people had long believed in the existence of multiple deities that were said to possess great power that they used to protect and bless the country. Each deity had their own area of expertise and what kind of blessing could they do. However, there was a female deity that was said to be the strongest of them all, as she held the power of the sun. Hence her title, the Sun Goddess. Being the symbol of light that represented life, the Sun Goddess then became the deity that the people of Wano mainly worshipped, as there were many temples built dedicated only to her. Of course, the other deities were also worshipped, but the people's faith and loyalty to the sun goddess were much stronger compared to the other deities. In a form of hierarchy, the sun goddess stood above others, including the ruler of the country himself. And as for the reason why the sun goddess was associated with a fox among other animals, that would be because of the myths and stories of how she had a battle companion in a form of massive fox with 9 tails that were said to be strong enough to cause a huge tsunami with just a swing of one of its tails. And just like the legendary phoenix, that divine fox was also known as the legendary mythical creature, the Kyubi. However, before Kinemon could tell the mesmerized Luffy about the legendary fox, the older man suddenly paused what he was doing as his body went still, confusing Luffy. "What's wrong? Why did you stop?" Instead of answering Luffy's question, Kinemon widened his eyes filled with surprise as he looked ahead with deep concentration. Then, a big smile appeared on his face. "It's him! I can feel his Ryo!" Kinemon suddenly exclaimed. And just like that, before Luffy could even react, the samurai started to sprint away with a speed that no ordinary person could achieve. But who was Luffy? This guy was far away from being ordinary. With a loud hey, Luffy immediately went after the samurai, catching up to him in no time with his own speed. Somewhere else not far from Kinemon and Luffy's location. Inside the empty dining hall of the facility, Nero was sitting leisurely at one of the many empty tables. Beside her was a young boy who seemed to be between the ages of 6 to 7 years old. This boy was the little fellow that she had rescued earlier. He was also the son that Kinemon had been searching for with his life on the line, Momonosuke. The child had the similar top-knot hairstyle at the back of his head just like Kinemon. However, unlike Kinemon who had a full head of hair, Momonosuke was bald at the front top of his head. Unlike when he was naked when she found him earlier, the boy was now wearing a small yukata for children that she had bought with many other children's clothing, in which she was planning to donate to the one and only orphanage house in Yuzu once she had returned home. As Nero was looking at him, who was eating the bento made by Sanji earlier, she was glad to see that he seemed to be in a better condition now than he was before. After she had taken him out of the dump site, she didn't hesitate to transfer a little bit of her chakra to him, enough for the boy to regain energy. Only when she saw that his complexion had gotten better did she take him away, in which she ended up at this place. Once he had woken up, and after convincing him that she knew him and his father, she then took out the bento that she had received from Sanji earlier and handed it to him. When he had finished the bento, Nero asked, "Was it good?" Momonosuke blushed when he realized that he had finished everything cleanly. But he still nodded his head. "I'm glad to hear that," she said, before taking out a bottle of water from her storage seal. She opened it before giving it to the little boy. "Here, have some." Momonosuke only stared at the bottle in her hand for a few moments, as if he was contemplating whether he should take it or not. But as he remembered that he had already eaten the food given by her anyway, he might as well just accept the water too. Plus, he admitted that he was really thirsty. "Thank you," he said as he accepted the water from her. Usually, he wouldn't even take any food from a complete stranger. These past few days, ever since he got taken away by the bad people, Momonosuke had been rather cautious with everyone and everything around him. He kept his guard up and he never let a single soul get near and closer to him, including those naive and foolish children that were easily duped by those bad people. But ever since he met this woman, which was really not too long ago, something had been whispering in his ears that he could trust this stranger. It wasn't just because she was the one that had appeared in front of him when he was losing hope and almost gave up, or the fact that she managed to prove that she really knew him and his father. But her presence was giving off the feeling that made him at ease, making him feel assured that he would be fine. His own instinct was telling him that he could put his trust on her. It was hard to explain, but there was just something natural about her that made him feel safe. Therefore, when he opened his eyes and met her gaze for the first time not too long ago, he didn't push her away when he realized that he was being embraced by a total stranger. All he could feel was that he was safe and that she gave him the feelings of great comfort and warmth that he had missed so dearly. Momonosuke knew that one wrong mistake would lead to his possible demise. And he couldn't afford to be dead now. Therefore, Ever since the first day he was on the wrong ship with many unfamiliar people with hidden motives, he hardened his resolve and never took anything that was given or offered by another person. Not even when some harmless children were trying to get close to him and attempted to advise him to eat something. He didn't even reveal his name. When he overheard the conversation between the bad guys, he then ran away and hid himself. He was tired. He was hungry. He was frustrated. The only thing that he managed to eat was that one awful fruit that was so bad that it made him feel funny. Not only it made him feel strange, but it also turned him into something else. It was only temporary, but he vaguely remembered that he wasn't his usual self after he ate that rotten fruit. And for some reasons, after he realized that he was himself once again, he was without any clothing. Eventually, he ended up in the dirtiest but also the safest place of the building because nobody would be looking for him in the dump site. He didn't know how many days had passed since he was there without any light, food, and warmth. In the end, before he could succumb to his hunger and weak body, bright light suddenly came down from above, and there she was landing in the middle of the dirty ground gracefully as she was glowing brightly in gold. As the dark place suddenly brightened with her presence, young Momonosuke was stunned and touched. Her arrival was like a miracle that came in the moment of despair. When he saw her golden form, all he could mumble to himself at that moment was that Kami-sama has finally come to bring me home. He didn't know what happened after that. But when he heard a gentle voice telling him that his beloved father was waiting to see him, he surrendered to his desire and fell asleep. But not after voicing out his true feeling that he missed his father. Then when he woke up, a pair of bright eyes with the color of the sky suddenly greeted him. She wasn't glowing anymore, but nevertheless he knew that it was her. She had the same voice, and the same warmth. She, who dressed like the people of his homeland, but was actually a person from the outside world, had introduced himself as Naru. She claimed to have known his father, which then quickened his heartbeat and gave him that sense of expectation. Then she said it. Kinemon-san will be glad to know that you're safe now. After taking a few gulps of the water, Momonosuke looked at the woman beside him. He was then distracted by the lines on her face which reminded him of those animals with whiskers. Unconsciously, an image of a fox suddenly appeared in his head. Of course, Naru also noticed the very obvious gaze on her. "Is there something wrong?" she asked. The boy was startled with her sudden question and immediately shook his head. Cheeks flushing red for being caught staring, he turned his head away from her to look ahead of him, which all he could see was several empty tables and chairs. "Are we going to find my father, after this?" he asked after a few moments. Smiling, she replied, "Of course. I'm confident that your father will be very happy to see you." Momonosuke didn't respond. "Kinemon-san has been doing his best to find you ever since you were taken away by the bad guys. Don't be mad at him for not finding you sooner. He was facing some difficulties when he arrived here." "I'm not mad at him," he said softly as he looked down to stare at the table. Naru didn't know what kind of expression that he made, but she could still detect the feelings of grievance, sadness, anger, and disappointment all mixed together coming from him. She figured that the boy must have been quite upset for what happened to him. Recalling his poor condition when she found him, her heart softened even more. Gently, she placed her hand on top of his head, and she could feel the rough texture of his shaved head. Momonosuke was surprised by the sudden touch, which then caused him to look up at her with his two big eyes. "You have gone through a lot," she said with a gentle smile. "You're such a brave and strong boy." And somehow, the words that just came out of her mouth just touched the most vulnerable part of Momonosuke's heart. The eyes that were looking into his eyes were as though they could see through his soul. Slowly, an image of another woman was starting to overlap with the blue-eyed woman. A woman with a different face but with the same soft, gentle smile and gentle eyes. He was reminded instantly of the warmth and the comfort that he was familiar with, but could never obtain again. Tears welled in his eyes, but instead of letting them fall, Momonosuke hardened his vulnerable heart before he wiped his tears away with the sleeve of his new cloth. Then he looked at her once again, before saying thank you. Those negative feelings were still there, but they were not as strong as earlier. Nera was relieved to see that his eyes were now glowing with some sparkles, which gave her the impression that he wasn't being that upset anymore. Smiling, Nera took out a couple of cups of ramen that she had in her food storage seal. She opened the lid of one of them first before placing it in front of Momonosuke, who was staring at her with amazement in his eyes. "Here, have it. Ramen is my favorite food," she said as she poured enough water from the bottle earlier inside the cup ramen before using her palm to cover the top part of the cup. She then heated the water using her chakra, which carried a small bit of fire nature. Momonosuke stared at the long bowl of noodles that she called ramen and couldn't help but to say, "This is ramen? It doesn't seem like the one that I always had." "It's instant ramen, which you can cook in under 3 minutes. Cool, right? At least I don't have to wait for a long time for my favorite food to be cooked," Nera said as she did the same thing she did to Momonosuke's ramen cup to hers. "You remind me of the ninjas back home. Probably because I'm a ninja as well." Momonosuke had guessed that after seeing what she could do, but was still surprised anyway. "And where are you from actually?" "I come from the kingdom of Yuzu." For some reason, he became excited upon hearing the name of a country that he never heard of before. "Yuzu? Do you have samurais in your country as well? What is it like in Yuzu?" Nera was amazed seeing how excited and eager he was. For some reason, the expression that the boy displayed on his face reminded her so much of Konohamaru. As an image of a young teen showing off his newly mastered Rasengan, Nera was hit by a wave of nostalgia and sadness. He should be a Hokage now, she thought fondly. Hearing his questions, she shook her head and answered, "No, we don't have samurais in Yuzu. But we do have warriors that can use swords. Our warriors are not limited in using swords as a weapon as well. We don't have ninjas either. It's just me." Ignoring the slight disappointment on the boy's face, Nera continued, "Yuzu can be said to be the same as Wano. People there wear the same style of clothing that you and I are wearing right now. Some of the structures of our buildings are the same as the ones in Wano as well. But we do not have the exact same cultures, nor do we have any shogun or daimyo. However, we do have an Yuzukage." "Yuzukage? Is that equal to a shogun?" "You can say that." Momonosuke became silent as he processed the information of this kingdom that was similar to Wano, and yet so different at the same time. Then he realized something. "Why do you know so much about my country if you are not from there?" "Because I have been there before." He widened his eyes at her. You went." Before Momonosuke could finish his words, Nera cut him off. "Your ramen is about to cool down. Trust me, it will taste better if you eat it while it is still hot." When the blue-eyed woman turned away from him and proceeded to focus on her own meal, as young as he was, the small child of Wano understood that the woman was trying to prevent him from speaking about Wano. Recalling that she knew his father, Momonosuke understood that she must have known about how bad Wano was at the moment, and refused to talk about it to a child like him. "Thank you for the food," he said as he also focused on his food with a heavy heart, as he couldn't help himself but to think about his country. Noticing that he was getting upset once again, Nera held back a sigh as she recalled the extreme reaction of Kinemon when she talked about Wano's poor condition. No matter what, in her eyes, Momonosuke was just a small child that shouldn't be burdened by the cruelties and ugliness of the world. However, as soft as her heart was, she couldn't bring herself to ignore the sad emotion coming from the boy. In the end, she said, "Don't worry. As long as there are people like you and your father who love your country with all of their heart, Wano will always be blessed. And as long as there is tomorrow, there is always hope." Momonosuke let her words sink in. It was unknown what he was thinking about, but a smile immediately bloomed on his face. Just like that, each enjoyed their own cup of ramen, with one of them marveling at the new taste of this new type of ramen on his tongue. The two accompanied each other like that, surrounded by a comfortable silence. Although this was just their first meeting, there was no such thing as awkwardness between the two of them. Momonosuke was willing to get closer to this stranger because he knew that he could trust her based on what his instinct was telling him. Whereas Nera found no trouble in interacting with Momonosuke because she herself had a lot of experiences in dealing with children. Not long after that, Nera tilted her head slightly towards the door with a knowing look. "It seems that we won't have to look for your father anymore." "Huh?" Just then, Momonosuke, are you here? Shouted a wide-eyed Kinemon who had just shown up, bursting through the door. Nei-chan? Luffy appeared soon after that, and his eyes immediately landed on his older sister. Then he saw the boy next to her. Who's that? Is he Momonosuke? Momonosuke. Kinemon cried out with a big smile and a pair of teary eyes when he saw Momonosuke, who was looking well. Momonosuke. It's me. It's. Father is here. Seeing the samurai, Momonosuke also had tears in his eyes. Without saying anything or waiting for another second to pass, he then went ahead and ran towards Kinemon, who was ready to welcome him with open arms. Both Naru and Luffy watched silently as Momonosuke fell into his father's embrace. Kinemon then proceeded to engulf the boy with a tight hug. Soon, a soft cry could be heard as Momonosuke poured out every grievance that he felt ever since they were separated. Father! Momonosuke cried out. Holding back his tears, Kinemon's heart almost shattered as he listened to the child's heart-wrenching cry. But as sad and guilty he was, there was nothing that he could do at that moment other than continuing to hug him and to let the young child know that he was not alone anymore. He was safe now. While the father-son duo had their emotional reunion, Luffy had gone to his sister's side. They watched the reunion in silence as both siblings couldn't help but to recall the time when they first met their own father. In Naru's case, instead of thinking of Dragon, she was thinking of her first time meeting Minato and Kushina. And of course, while there was hello, there was also goodbye. When Naru was immersed in her sad but fond memories of her late parents, Luffy opened his mouth and said, "So that's Momonosuke? His hair is kinda funny." Naru smiled in amusement when she heard Luffy's blunt comment. That's the traditional hairstyle of their people. It's common to have that kind of hairstyle in their country, she tried to explain. But Kinemon has a lot of hair. He meant to say that unlike Kinemon, who had a full head of hair, Momonosuke was bald at the front top of his head. Well, you're right, was what the amused Naru could say. A few minutes later, after the father-son duo had calmed down from their emotional reunion, Kinemon went to express his gratitude for helping him to find Momonosuke. I didn't do much. It was a great coincidence that I managed to find Momokun since I was nearby from where he was. But still, I, Kinemon, would like to thank you with my utmost sincerity. Then he bowed to her and Luffy's direction at 90°. Momonosuke was temporarily stunned upon seeing how the samurai was willing to be humble enough to bow to another person who wasn't his superior. But that was only for a moment, before he too went ahead and bowed to Naru. Thank you? He didn't know about the man with the straw hat, but he knew that Naru was his savior. Hence why he only bowed in gratitude towards her. My pleasure, Naru said as she accepted their bows. Nei-chan, do you still have any food left? Asked Luffy suddenly as he stared at the empty ramen cups and the bento box that he recognized to be from Sanji on the table. I want to eat meat. There's no meat, but I can give you some bread and fruits if you still want it, she said. I want, Luffy replied eagerly. Bread and fruits were not meat, but food was still food anyway. He'd want anything that could fill his stomach. Shaking her head at her brother's obvious desire and greed for food, she summoned out the scroll that contained her personal food supply. Under the other three's watching eyes, she took out many different types of fruit and dessert like breads, cakes, and muffins before placing them on the table. Luffy, Kinemon, and Momonosuke were staring at the pile of food with sparkles in their eyes. Especially Momonosuke, who had been starving for many days. It was obvious that he was still hungry as the food he ate earlier was not enough. Thank you for the food, said Luffy before he started to stuff every food that he could grab into his mouth. Don't just stand there and stare, go ahead and eat, Naru said to the other two. Though it had only been a few hours, it seemed that Kinemon was already familiar and closer to the two siblings, as he didn't feel shy and immediately joined Luffy. Momonosuke hesitated only for a couple of seconds before he joined in the older man's footsteps in trying out the desserts that were actually made by Sanji when they were on their way to the surface from the Fishman Island. They had plenty of free time before, so the chef decided to spend most of his time in his kitchen preparing all kinds of food. While the other three ate in bliss and happiness, Nera was just about to pick up a shiny red apple that caught her attention, but her hand stopped halfway when she suddenly received a new set of memories from one of her clones. Processing her new memories, Nera smirked before she turned to look at the other three who were busy eating. "The three of you stay here for a while, and wait for my return," she said. "Huh? Nei-chan, you're going somewhere?" asked Luffy after he gulped down everything in his mouth. Giving them the eye smile, she nodded. "I'm going to welcome a new friend,"